I was just an ordinary welder at a repair shop, but I became the primary target for assassins from all over the world. All because I used scrap and second-hand parts to build a giant mecha far surpassing world, cutting-edge technology, facing military pressure from Western countries. I was completely unfazed, commanding the mecha to strike head-on, tearing apart aircraft carriers with my bare hands, withstanding nuclear bombs, terrifying nations into fleeing overnight. With this technology and achievement, I was honored by the nation as the youngest national hero, with free reign over all military industry, and enjoying the highest national military authority. And just a month ago, I was the most down-and-out welder in Jiangnan City, running the Red Star repair shop on the verge of bankruptcy, crushed by 300,000 yuan in debt, unable to afford a decent meal, living solely on instant noodles. This day I was working as usual, when I suddenly heard a commotion. Su J, I am telling you this today. 300,000 yuan principal and interest. If you can't pay it today, all the scrap metal in this broken workshop of yours, along with this piece of land, I'll have excavators flatten it for you. The speaker was a bald fat man, wearing a thick gold chain around his neck, and carrying a baseball bat, pointing menacingly at a figure in the back of the repair shop. Behind the bald man stood 4 thugs, who were wantonly kicking scattered car parts, making the already messy repair shop chaotic. Deep in the workshop, my back was to them. Ignoring the noise behind me, I was wearing a sweat-soaked, yellowed collar work vest, a heavy welding mask on my head, a welding torch in my hand, a blue arc light flashing wildly in the dim workshop. I was forcibly welding a scrapped tractor engine base onto the frame of a modified tricycle. Seeing that I was ignoring him, the bald man felt his pride wounded. I am talking to you. Do you hear me? Playing deaf are you? He picked up the baseball bat and smashed it hard against the air compressor next to me. The compressor's casing dented inward. I slowly straightened up, turned off the welding torch, removed my welding mask, revealing a slightly thin but well-defined face. I spat out the burnt cigarette butt from my mouth, and casually picked up a dirty rag to wipe my hands. Brother Lu, you broke my air pump, which is worth 800 yuan on the second-hand market. Are we settling this debt now, or will it be deducted from my outstanding loan? My voice was calm, without anger or fear, only a chilling rationality. The bald man was stunned for a moment, then laughed angrily. Today I'll even burn down this broken shop of yours. What can you do to me? Su J, the money your old man borrowed before he died is rightfully owed. If you don't have the money today, then hand over the land deed as collateral. I looked down at my calloused hands, and hands with small burn scars. These are the hands I am proud of, as long as I am given enough tools and blueprints. I dare say that in this world, there's no machine I can't build. But in this era where capital crushes everything, hands that can craft parts by hand can't even save a repair shop on the verge of bankruptcy. Hongxing Heavy Industry. This is the only memory the old man left me, and also my last fortress. I will definitely pay you back, but you can't take the deed. I raised my head. A hint of determination flashed in my eyes. I prepared to reach under the operating table to grab the heavy wrench I had hidden for a long time. Even if I lose my life here today, I will never let these people touch a single hair of the repair shop. Just as the atmosphere was tense, and the bald man was about to signal his men to act, the dusty old computer speakers in the corner of the repair shop, which were usually only used to listen to the radio, suddenly let out a crisp notification sound. Immediately a robotic female voice devoid of emotion resounded through the empty factory. Your account ending in 8,888 has received 50 million yuan. Balance 50,231 yuan. The entire scene fell into dead silence. The baseball bat the bald man held high in midair froze. The 4 thugs behind him also froze as if under a spell. Their mouths were open wide enough to fit a light bulb. My hand reaching for the wrench also stopped in midair. My pupils dilated instantly. My heart skipped a beat. 50 million yuan. I immediately dropped the towel and rushed to the computer in 3 quick steps, clicking on the back end of the order page. On the screen, an order from an anonymous user was prominently displayed. Order details. Custom mecha model. Codename required. Crimson Storm. Height 50 meters. Requires high damping hydraulic system for all joints. Supports omnidirectional movement. Core power source must have realistic lighting and heating effects. Paint finish to be military grade matte anti-rust paint. Budget is unlimited. Deposit paid, 50 million yuan. Customer remarks. Boss, I am not short on money. Just seek realism. Don't fool me with plastic. What I want is the industrial romance that belongs to men. If it's done well, the final payment will be doubled. I stared intently at the 50 meters on the screen, my breathing becoming heavy. The first reaction of an ordinary person seeing this order would definitely be that they've encountered a scammer, or that the customer missed a decimal point when typing. A 50-centimeter mecha figurine. A 50 million yuan deposit. That would still be outrageous. But at this moment, looking at the zeros that actually existed in my bank account, my mind didn't feel absurd. Instead, something felt completely ignited. 50 meters, that's not a model. That's a real warship. It's the ultimate fantasy of human ground warfare. Susu J, you've really made it. Are you running a scam? The bald man swallowed, his voice trembling slightly. The amount of 50 million yuan had completely exceeded the cognitive scope of him, a low-level debt collector. I ignored the bald man. My gaze was fixed on the screen. A smile almost manic slowly spread across my lips. I knew this was likely a typo from a Chunibyo rich kid. But I also knew the money had already arrived in my account. And Hongqing Heavy Industry needed this money to survive. Refund. In my dictionary, a deposit that has entered my pocket is non-negotiable even if God himself came. Since you dared to give, I dare to build. The moment I made up my mind, a stream of faint blue data suddenly flashed in the depths of my retina. Immediately after, a cold mechanical voice devoid of any human emotion boomed directly in my cerebral cortex. Detected host receiving an unconventional military order. Order classification. SSS rank strongest ground armament construction mission. Activation conditions met. Hardcore military manufacturing system bound. Scanning current material reserves. Scan complete. Inferior materials. Lack of rare metals. Lack of processing beds. Lack of basic power infrastructure. Host's current survival environment determined to be harsh. Newbie gift package issued. Obtained blueprint for original neural bridge operation pod. Obtained miniature cold fusion reactor. Beginner's manual for manual construction. Obtained master level titanium alloy high pressure welding skill. System mission issued. Complete the physical assembly of a 50-meter class mecha within 30 days. Mission reward. Unlock blueprint for planetary class railgun. A large number of complex breathtaking mechanical diagrams, energy circuit calculation formulas and material science knowledge poured into my mind like a bursting dam. The intense pain made me involuntarily clutch my forehead. But with the pain came a sense of sudden clarity and enlightenment. Those unreasonable structures that once existed in sci-fi movies were all broken down by the system's imparted knowledge into realistic solutions that could be painstakingly crafted with a basic lathe and an electric welder. I opened my eyes, and a faint stream of blue data seemed to flicker in the depths of my pupils. I turned around and looked at the still stunned bald man. I picked up my phone from the nearby workbench and operated it a few times with decisive efficiency. Beep, the bald man's phone rang. He fumbled for his phone, and his eyes nearly popped out when he saw the text message notification, 300,000. Including principal and interest, not a penny less. The debt was cleared. Consider the broken air pump a gift for your cigarettes. I walked to the roller shutter door, grabbed the heavy chain, and told him to get out of my workshop with his men. From today onwards, Hongqing Heavy Industry will not receive visitors. The bald man opened his mouth, as if wanting to say something tough to regain face. But looking at my cold eyes and the bizarre 50 million deposit notification sound from earlier, he wisely shut his mouth. He led his subordinates and sheepishly walked out of the factory. I slammed the heavy roller shutter door down. I stood in the center of the empty factory. I yanked the heavy roller shutter down hard. I stood in the center of the empty factory, looking at the ground full of scrap metal, and that old welding machine. Took a deep breath of the rust-scented air, as if savoring a peerless vintage wine. 50 meters. Cold fusion. Neural bridging. I grabbed the welding torch I had just put down, and put on the welding mask again. I'll take this job. The rolling shutter door of Hongqing Heavy Industry repair shop was tightly closed, isolating the scorching heat of the August afternoon outside. Inside the workshop, the ethereal blue arc light leapt as if alive. The air was filled with the pungent smell of ozone, the smell of burning and the fishy smell of melting metal. I took off the welding mask covered in black spots, and hung it casually on the rusty iron rack next to it. Sweat dripped down my jawline, onto the oil-stained cement floor, splashing a small puddle. I closed my tired eyes. Deep within my cerebral cortex, the massive data stream instilled by the system was automatically unpacking. It was a three-dimensional holographic projection, a crimson mecha 50 meters tall, slowly rotated in my mind. From the macroscopic design of the armor's inclination angle, to the microscopic arrangement of every nerve and hydraulic pipeline, meticulous. 50 meters, I muttered to myself. My knuckles tapped a dull rhythm. On the rough workbench, heavy fighter jets are usually around 20 meters long. cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and a 50-meter-tall steel behemoth that can walk on two legs in all directions. Its structural stress power output and balance system complexity increase exponentially. A deposit of 50 million RMB sounds like a huge sum, but if it were according to the regular military procurement process, this money wouldn't even be enough to buy the special titanium alloy scraps for the outer armor of a mecha's thigh. Even more fatal is those strictly controlled, aerospace-grade materials and high-precision machine tools. Even with money, ordinary people wouldn't even have the right to touch them. Accessing the underlying logic and alternative material solutions for the micro-cold fusion reactor, I issued a command in my mind. Rows of ethereal blue data waterfalls immediately appeared before my retina. The system judged my current survival conditions to be too harsh. The handcrafted solution it provided was insane, using civilian-grade or even scrap industrial waste, through specific physical arrangements and extreme compression ignition, to forcibly create a magnetic confinement environment. I opened my eyes. My gaze swept over the pile of scrap metal in the corner of the workshop. A fanatical curve appeared at the corner of my mouth. Since I can't take the official military route, I'll make the most of the wild heavy industry's unconventional path. Half an hour later, I arrived at Jiangnan City, Hongda Renewable Resources Recycling Station in the southern suburbs. This is the largest industrial waste disposal site in the province. Nicknamed the scrap metal graveyard by the industry, I put on a pair of work gloves and walked straight towards the metal mountain made of scrap cars, rusty machine tools and broken steel bars. Isn't this Boss Sue from Hongxing Factory? Have you paid off your debt to Bald Lu? Do you have spare money to come here and pick up trash? You have spare money to come here and pick up junk. The scrap yard owner, Fatty Zhao, with his beer belly, swung his palm leaf fan. He sat up from his lounge chair in the shade. His tone carried a hint of teasing. I ignored his sarcastic remarks. I pulled a stack of 100 yuan bills from my pocket. With a slap I placed them on Zhao Fatty's small wooden table stained with tea. The thickness was at least 10,000 yuan. Fatty Zhao's eyes instantly widened. The palm leaf fan stopped mid-air. What is this? For the next 2 hours, this mountain of scrap is mine to command. Whatever I fancy, you'll be responsible for dispatching a crane to load it and send it back to the factory. The excess money will be settled when unloading. My voice was clean and decisive. Without any hesitation, money makes the world go round. Fatty Zhao immediately put on a fawning smile. He beckoned a few workers to bring an old crawler crane. I took a deep breath. Master-level mechanical intuition activated. When I opened my eyes again, the graveyard of scrap metal before me had undergone a complete transformation. Those lumps of iron that were worthless in the eyes of ordinary people, rusty parts, were decomposed on my retina, with various material densities labeled iron metal fatigue and potential for reshaping values. I moved like a tyrant surveying his territory, weaving through mountains of metal junk. I stopped. I reached out and pointed to a half-crushed, deep-sea freighter diesel engine cylinder block. Cast iron casing. The pressure resistance level is barely sufficient. Fatty Zhao looked at the 2-ton pile of greasy scrap iron. He swallowed. What do you want this junk for? Besides melting it down for iron, it's too much of a hassle to even sell as scrap. Stop the nonsense and load it. I continued walking forward. That scrapped MRI machine. Take out all the superconducting coils for me. If the insulation layer is even slightly damaged, I'll deduct 1,000 yuan from you. The entire afternoon, the scrapyard echoed with the roar of crane engines. Fatty Zhao looked at the items I picked out, and his shock grew. From the hydraulic main shaft of a heavy-duty mining excavator, to the scrapped traction motor of a high-speed train, and then to parts of high-precision medical equipment retired from hospitals. This was definitely not a procurement list for a car repair shop. What was this kid trying to do? Build a tank? As evening approached, 3 heavy trucks loaded with heavy industrial scrap rumbled into the Hongxing Heavy Industry Repair Plant. As the last batch of goods was unloaded, I settled the final payment. I kicked out all the extraneous personnel from the workshop, and then I pulled down the heavy rolling shutter door again. I stood in the center of a mountain of metal parts. I took a deep breath of air that smelled of engine oil and rust. Blood surged in my veins. An indescribable desire to create took hold of my body. Step 1. Shape the fusion reactor casing. I grabbed the heavy welding torch, walked to the cylinder block of the giant freighter engine. This behemoth, originally used to propel tens of thousands of tons of steel across the sea, was now in my eyes merely a rough embryo. The plasma cutter drew a dazzling blade of white heat in the dim workshop. My wrist was extremely steady. Master-level muscle memory ensured my cutting path had not even a millimeter of deviation. The 5 centimeters thick high-strength cast iron shell, under the 3000-degree plasma beam, was smoothly sliced open, as if by a hot knife through butter. Sparks flew everywhere in the hall like brilliant fireworks, reflecting my focused, almost frenzied profile. I needed to use this cylinder block to forge a vacuum magnetic confinement chamber, capable of withstanding million-degree plasma impact. Cutting, grinding, reassembling, I covered the inner wall of the chamber with several pieces of aerospace-grade tungsten steel armor plates I found in the scrap yard. Next came the real technical suppression. I picked up the welding torch. This time it wasn't ordinary electric welding, but the master-level, titanium alloy high-pressure welding skill bestowed by the system. A strong blue arc exploded at the junction of the tungsten steel and cast iron. Sampling these two metals, they were almost impossible to perfectly dissolve, but in my hands, the molten pool formed by the melting welding rod restructured itself with a microscopic structure that defied common sense in materials science. Perfect fine welds like dragon scales, rapidly formed at the seams. No pores, perfect as if naturally grown metallic veins. Night had completely fallen. The fluorescent lights in the workshop had long been turned off. The only source of illumination was the constantly flashing arc light from my hand, and the dim red halo emitted by the red-hot metal parts on the workbench. After an unknown amount of time, when the last superconducting coil was tightly wound around the exterior of the spherical chamber and connected to the pacing matrix modified from a discarded high-frequency transformer, I stopped. I put down the welding torch, pulled over a towel and wiped the black soot from my face. My chest heaved. On the workbench before me sat a spherical mechanical body about 2 meters in diameter, covered in rough welds and wound with dense copper-colored coils. It looked like some kind of totem dug out of a cyberpunk ruin, possessing a violent aesthetic with a strong sense of patchwork. But this was the heart of the 50-meter mecha, the shape of the micro-cold fusion reactor. Everything was ready, just waiting for ignition. I walked to the distribution box, directly pulled off the main cable of the repair shop, stripped the insulation in a flash, and forcefully connected the thick copper wires to the primary excitation coil of the reactor. Although cold fusion can be maintained at room temperature, the moment of its activation requires a massive amount of electrical energy to excite the superconducting coil, forming an absolute magnetic confinement field and forcibly igniting the bronze isotope. I took a deep breath and gripped the old industrial circuit breaker with both hands, forcibly igniting the bronze isotope. I took a deep breath. Hands gripped the old industrial circuit breaker. Success or failure hinges on this moment. May the old man bless this area, and the power grid not be completely scrapped. I yanked the circuit breaker down with a bang. This wasn't the sound of an explosion, but the terrifying electromagnetic resonance generated by a powerful current instantly coursing through the coils. The lights in the entire workshop flickered for a moment, and then shattered. 3 kilometers away from Hongqing Factory, in the Nan'an City South substation, the on-duty uncle was holding a teacup and listening to the radio. The giant instrument panel on the wall emitted a piercing alarm, indicating that the pointer for the area's load had, in 0.1 seconds, frantically slammed towards the highest value in the red zone. Which factory is running the pressure vessel at midnight? The uncle was so startled that he dropped his teacup, spilling scalding tea all over the floor. He rushed to the control console, ready to cut off power to the overloaded area. But before he could press the button, the load pointer at the same bizarre speed instantly dropped back to normal levels, as if the terrifying current that could have drained the entire southern suburban power grid had been swallowed by some black hole. The Hongqing Heavy Industry Workshop was deathly silent. I stood in the darkness, staring intently at the spherical mechanical object on the workbench. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. A sound finer than a mosquito's wingbeat emanated from within the sphere. Then the sound began to amplify exponentially, becoming a low, deep resonance like the breath of an ancient behemoth. A faint ethereal blue light seeped through the rough metal seams. The light grew stronger and stronger. The surrounding air began to ripple visibly due to the distortion from the strong magnetic field. Visible ripples. The iron filings and screws on the ground seemed to lose their gravity and slowly floated into the air, forming around the reactor a small metallic ring. Room temperature magnetic confinement field formed. Plasma ignition successful. I bathed in the intoxicating ethereal blue glow, feeling the reactor pieced together from a pile of scrap metal, continuously releasing terrifying energy sufficient to power a small city. This is the ultimate romance of handcrafting heavy industry. Just then, in the corner of the workbench, the domestic mobile phone with a cracked screen suddenly started vibrating wildly. The piercing default ringtone shattered the sacred silent atmosphere of the workshop. I walked over and picked up the phone. The screen displayed over a dozen unread messages. All from the rich idiot with money, young Master Wang, the 50 million client. I opened the chat window. Young Master Wang's message. Where are you? Where the hell are you? You took a 50 million order and didn't even make a peep. Don't think I can't find you hiding in that broken factory. I am telling you, Su Jae. This young master has limited patience. What I want is, do you understand? A 50-meter tall crimson storm articulated damping luminous core. If you can't show me any progress chart that satisfies me today, I'll drive my Ferrari tomorrow with 10 excavators to level your damn factory. Exposing you as a fraud, live on the internet. You damn scammer, you're finished. Finally, a voice message. I clicked on the voice message. Wang Siki's furious, arrogant voice, clearly that of a spoiled rich kid, came through. Hey Su, are you making figurines with your feet? Where's the core? The power system? Don't try to fool me with a few light tubes. I want to see some technological flair. Technological flair? After listening to the voice message, I didn't get angry. Instead, I grinned. Technological flair, huh? I raised my phone and opened the camera. I pointed the lens at the workbench, at the metal debris that was currently suspended, emitting a blue light that pierced the retina. A miniature nuclear reactor. To add to the realism, I even walked a little closer, allowing the microphone to record the reactor's bone-chilling infrasound roar. A photo plus a 10-second short video were directly clicked and sent. 123. By the way, with my oil-stained finger, I typed a seemingly ordinary line on the screen. Progress report. Miniature cold fusion reactor ignition test complete. Magnetic confinement field stable. Output power tentatively set at 5 million kilowatts. Next we will begin forging the mecha skeleton. For expedited orders, please pay the second installment. I casually tossed my phone onto the workbench and turned around, dragging a heavy-duty mining cutter ID salvaged from a scrap yard out of the shadows. Next I am going to start crafting this young master's 50-meter-long mecha legs. And at this very moment, in a luxurious villa hundreds of kilometers away, Wang Siki was holding a glass of Bordeaux red wine, reclining comfortably on a leather sofa, looking at the message I sent on his phone screen. A cold, disdainful smile played on his lips. Miniature cold fusion? 5 million kilowatts? This scammer really thinks I am an idiot. He doesn't even bother to draft his lies. He casually clicked to play the 10-second short video. When that pure, unadulterated blue plasma glow, free of any special effects or texture traces, and that low-frequency roar powerful enough to resonate in the chest cavity through the phone speaker, erupted in the spacious living room. The wine glass in Wang Siki's hand slipped straight down. With a crash, it shattered on the expensive carpet. Scarlet wine splashed all over his limited edition white sneakers. He suddenly sprang up from the sofa, his eyes glued to the phone screen, his pupils trembling violently. Is this CGI or real? Wang Siki stared intently at the phone screen, his pupils trembling violently in their sockets. The 10-second short video was set to loop automatically. The faint blue plasma halo, the rough savage cast iron casing, the metal debris suspended in midair, and that low-frequency infrasound roar that seemed to penetrate the very bones through the speakers. He thought it was Hollywood-level CG effects. Watching it for the third time, the hairs on his back began to stand on end. Watching it for the 10th time, he felt his heart beating in sync with the frequency of that miniature reactor. This is impossible. This light refraction rate, this physics collision engine, this light and shadow refractive index, this physics collision engine. Wang Siki trembled and forwarded the video directly to someone with the note, Li Gong, director of trial effects. On the other end of the line, Li Gong's voice was sharp and broken. Where did you get this video from? Which military-grade secret facility is this test footage from? Wang Siki swallowed a dry mouthful of saliva. Are you sure this isn't special effects? Can I find someone who makes movies and have them created in a few days? Create what nonsense? Li Gong swore on the phone, his voice trembling with excitement. Look at the shot in the second. When the light penetrates the air, the Lorentz force deflection of dust particles under a strong magnetic field. The trajectory is completely random and conforms to fluid dynamics. And those pieces of suspended scrap metal, their shadow edges produced microscopic spatial distortions, let alone a few days. Even if you booked all the rendering farms of Pixar Industrial, Light and Magic, and it would take a year to calculate this level of physical realism. This is real footage. Absolutely real footage. The phone slipped from her ear. Wang Siki slumped onto the leather sofa, her mind buzzing. That broke welder named Su Jae. That bottom dweller who owed a mountain of debt, could barely afford instant noodles, took a 50 million deposit and didn't run away, didn't buy a sports car, but actually in that doghouse-like, abandoned repair shop, ignited a miniature sun. The world has gone mad. Wang Siki suddenly sprang up from the sofa, grabbed her windbreaker from the rack, and roared towards the door. Prepare the car for the airport. Notify the captain. Apply for a flight to Jiangnan City immediately right now. Amidst the chaos, this second-generation rich kid who usually only knew how to race cars and give gifts, with a heart pounding like a tidal wave, rushed to Jiangnan City overnight. At the same time, Jiangnan City Hongqing Heavy Industry Repair Shop. Unaware of the undercurrents outside, I stood before a massive, heavy-duty mining cutting machine. My hands firmly gripped the control lever. A 2-meter diameter diamond saw blade spun at high speed, cutting into a thick solid high-carbon steel column. Sparks like a cascading golden waterfall erupted wildly in the dim workshop, illuminating my face covered in black soot. The cold fusion reactor is just the heart. The mecha needs bones to bear this violent power. The blueprints provided by the system flickered in my retinas. It was a structural diagram of a 15-meter-long mechanical right leg. The meshing of every bearing, 28.36 the path of every hydraulic pipe, was precise to the millimeter. Tibial load test for the lower leg. Material density not up to standard. Requires titanium alloy cladding and forging. I kicked away the cut scrap steel, and pulled the control rope for the overhead crane with one hand. With a grating sound of metal friction, several high-strength alloy plates disassembled from the arresting gear of a scrapped aircraft carrier were lifted into the air. I grabbed the plasma welding torch which I had privately modified to increase its output power. Master-level welding skills were once again on display. Azure arcs danced between the alloy plates and the high-carbon steel pillars. The intense heat caused severe optical distortion in the surrounding air. My movements were devoid of any excess, like a skilled surgeon, stitching the bones of an ancient behemoth. 4 hours later, as the night outside the factory grew as thick as ink, the first grand industrial creation finally took shape in the center of the cluttered workshop. It was a mechanical giant leg composed purely of heavy hydraulic steel pipes, bearings and thick cables. It had no flashy paint job. Its surface covered in rough welds, rust and the marks of arc burns. The thigh section was fitted with 4 main hydraulic cylinders, removed from a heavy excavator, their thick piston rods glinting with a cold icy light. The calf was wrapped in dense superconducting coils, extending to the mechanical footbase which was 3 meters wide, and had a triangular grip structure. It was 15 meters tall, equivalent to a 5-story building. Even though it was currently lying quietly on a specially made jig, the overwhelming pressure of heavy industry emanating from it was still enough to make one feel suffocated. I stood beside the mechanical leg, and in comparison, I was as tiny as an ant standing before a dragon. I pulled off the towel hanging around my neck and wiped the sweat from my eyes. My chest heaved violently. The continuous high-intensity work had left my muscles aching as if they would split, but my eyes burned with an unprecedented fervor. Physical skeleton assembly complete. Skeleton stress test passed. Current stage, neural bridge system deployment. Warning, host currently lacks military-grade brain-computer interface equipment. System will provide an alternative solution. Electromyographic neuron reverse conduction. The moment the system prompt ended, new blueprints overlaid my retina. I took a deep breath, turned and walked towards the pile of parts from an MRI machine I had salvaged from the hospital scrap heap. I extracted the highly sensitive superconducting signal wires and began laying them along the metal skeleton of the mechanical leg. This was destined to be a delicate micro-sculpting surgery. Between the rough steel gears, the hair-thin superconducting wires were carefully embedded by me into the reserved grooves. They were like the blood vessels and nerves of this mechanical leg, eventually converging in a central limit box above the knee. Time ticked by, until the eastern sky began to show the color of fish belly. With bloodshot eyes, I rummaged through my toolbox for some medical electrode patches. I connected the patches to the ends of the superconducting wires, then rolled up the cuffs of my work pants and attached the patches to my right legs, calf, knee and thigh muscle groups respectively. Without a brain-computer interface, I would use the most primitive and crude method, physical muscle electrical signals to establish resonance. Dragging my weary steps, I walked to the humming miniature cold fusion reactor and connected the main power cable to the mechanical leg. Energy input. Neural system powered on. The slumbering steel behemoth instantly awoke. On the 15-meter-long mechanical leg, the superconducting coils hidden in the armor gaps sequentially lit up with an azure glow, Like energy pathways. Like energy meridians. Flowing from the base of the thigh to the sole of the foot. 4 heavy-duty hydraulic cylinders roared low. The hydraulic oil inside instantly reached operating pressure. I stood 5 meters away from the mechanical leg, staring at that behemoth, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. I tried to make my right tiptoe lift up slightly. This was a movement so small it was almost imperceptible. The electrode patch captured this faint muscle electrical signal, amplified and converted it, instantly transmitted through the superconducting harness, into the central limit core of the mechanical leg. A loud bang exploded in the workshop. The 15-meter steel leg lying flat on the fixture. Its giant triangular mechanical foot actually precisely replicated my movement, sharply flicking up 120 degrees. The terrifying force directly overturned the heavy steel fixture. The giant mechanical foot bottom slammed hard onto a load-bearing concrete pillar next to it. Gravel splashed. Dust billowed. The surface of the concrete pillar, which required 3 people to embrace, was directly smashed with a depth of over 10 centimeters of spiderweb-like cracks. The roof of the entire repair shop trembled violently, as if it had experienced a small earthquake. I stood frozen in place, looking at the concrete pillar that had suffered such abuse. Then looked down at my right foot. A delusion of controlling destructive power instantly assaulted my reason. There was no delay. The scrap superconducting wire optimized by the system achieved zero latency motion synchronization. This was not a machine that required typing on a keyboard or pushing and pulling joysticks. This was an extension of my body. I made it. I really made it. To hell with the blueprints. To hell with the assembly line, ha ha ha. Today I will create a god from this pile of scrap. With my own hands. And I didn't know that. The moment I activated the mechanical leg's neural bridge, and the reactor's output power experienced an instantaneous peak on a Zeus-class electronic reconnaissance ship disguised as an oceanographic research vessel. A piercing highest-level alarm suddenly tore through the command center's comm. The entire wall of radar screens was instantly covered in blinding red light. The monitoring room supervisor, who was drinking iced coffee, was startled by the sudden alarm and trembled all over. Coffee spilled all over the console. Enemy attack? The supervisor roared, rushing to the main console. The radar analyst's hands flew across the keyboard, his face as pale as paper. He pointed to the suddenly surging massive energy peak in the center of the screen, his voice trembling. Sir, it's not an enemy attack. Our deep space magnetic field detection satellite just detected an abnormal energy burst in the eastern coastal region of Longguo. The supervisor leaned closer to the screen, looking at the data. His brows furrowed tightly. What's the energy yield? 130,220. What's the energy yield? 250-30-330-130-2050-2450. Are they conducting underground nuclear tests? 2,950. No, it's not a nuclear test. There are no characteristics of radioactive dust. The analyst swallowed a mouthful of saliva and brought up a more detailed waveform diagram. This waveform. A more detailed waveform diagram was displayed. This waveform. Sir, this is more like a small controllable star. Its magnetic confinement frequency perfectly defies common sense in existing physics, and this energy source just now produced a regular electromagnetic pulse, like the nerve impulse of some massive creature. The supervisor's face completely changed. A super high energy body that can operate stably at room temperature and possesses biological nerve conduction characteristics. What does this represent? He knew better than anyone. This represents Dragon Country's individual combat power armor technology, or some revolutionary weapon engine, has crossed the gap of the era. Immediately locate the energy source coordinates. The supervisor issued a death order. 3 minutes later, a high-precision satellite map was magnified on the main screen. A red crosshair precisely locked onto the southern suburbs of Jiangnan City. As the image continuously zoomed in, penetrating the clouds, it finally focused on a rooftop. Magnification SOOX. The surrounding area was piled with dilapidated factories of scrap metal. Magnification 500x. The edge of the screen vaguely visible. A magnification SOOX. A sign with half the paint peeled off. Magnification 5000x. The command room fell into deathly silence. The command room fell into deathly silence. The supervisor stared at the junk shop that looked like a doghouse, feeling that his scientific worldview, built over decades, had been insulted. The energy peak that just surpassed our National Scientific Research Institute's level by 50 years came from this place that collects junk. The supervisor asked through gritted teeth. Analyst, you're sweating profusely. Sir, the data will never be wrong. And the satellite thermal imaging shows that the temperature inside that factory is soaring at a terrifying speed. The supervisor was silent for a full half-minute. He picked up the red encrypted secure phone on the table and dialed a number that went directly to the consortium headquarters. Blackstone Special Operations Group. This is Alpha 1. We've discovered a suspected, highest-level technological creation in Jiangnan City Dragon Country. The supervisor's eyes became cold and greedy. The target has no military background. It's just a civilian repair shop. Notify Executive Richard. Obtain the technical blueprints at all costs. If you can't get them. The supervisor paused, his tone chilling. Erase that factory along with the people inside. From the map, under the same night sky, at the highway toll station in Jiangnan City, a luxurious convoy of 6 pure black Range Rovers tore through the morning mist, their engines roaring as they charged into the city. In the lead car, Wang Siki tightly gripped the phone with the cracked screen. Her legs were still trembling unconsciously. Young master, we're almost at the southern suburbs. Should we go directly to that factory? The bodyguard and driver in the front row turned back and asked respectfully. Wang Siki took a deep breath, forcing down her racing heart. Don't get too close yet. Stop 500 meters away from his factory. Also, he hesitated and clicked on the live streaming app on his phone. As a popular curiosity review influencer with tens of millions of followers, he usually enjoyed doing debunking and exploration live streams. This time he didn't know what he was about to. Facing a shocking scam, or a miracle that could overturn the world. The livestream title was instantly modified. 50 million deposit scammed. Take the brothers to investigate on site. Jiangnan City's #1 divine-level deadbeat. See how he spins a colossal lie about a 50-meter mecha. 17 This factory young master is broadcasting live, relying on the vast amount of traffic accumulated over the years. And clickbait titles. The number of viewers in the livestream room instantly broke through 100,000. Dense bullet comments scrolled across the screen like a waterfall. Young master is up to his tricks again. A script for a 50 million deposit, right? A 50-meter mecha, how dare he brag. At this height it could box with Ultraman. Quick, I can't wait to see young master expose the scammer's dirty laundry. My guess is it's an Ultraman suit made of cardboard. Looking at the screen full of mockery and curious comments, Wang Siki didn't interact with his viewers as usual. He turned the camera towards the car window. The increasingly desolate suburban scenery. His palms were sweating. The vehicle stopped in a barren area 500 meters away from Hongqing heavy industry. Wang Siki opened the car door. The slightly cool morning breeze on his face cleared his head a bit. He took the Steadicam stabilizer handed to him by his assistant and aimed the lens at the distant, lonely dilapidated factory building. From the outside, it looked like a Fei Pin Wei Shozan on the verge of collapse. Rusted tin sheets, tangled weeds, not a trace of the so-called cutting-edge military industry. The laughter in the livestream room grew louder. This is it? This is the base of the big shot who received a 50 million deposit. It doesn't even have a proper entrance. Young master, call the police. I bet a bag of spicy chips. It's all collected scrap cardboard inside. Wang Siki gritted his teeth and ignored the bullet comments. He strode towards the factory building. His heart beat faster and faster. That strange plasma glow. The video kept replaying in his mind. When he was about 100 meters away from the factory entrance. Boom. A muffled, extremely loud sound came from inside the factory. The ground shook violently. Wang Siki stumbled and almost fell to the ground. The bullet comments in the livestream room froze for a second, then flooded out even more frantically. What the hell was that sound? Did a gas tank explode? Earthquake? Why does the camera look like it's shaking? Young master, run. Is this scammer making homemade bombs inside? Wang Siki steadied himself and stared intently at the closed roller shutter door. His intuition told him that it was definitely not an explosion. It was a pure physical collision. The sound of an object with terrifying mass hitting the ground. Go knock on the door. Wang Siki instructed his bodyguards. 2 burly bodyguards in black quickly stepped forward and pounded heavily on the roller shutter door with their fists, making dull thudding sounds. Is anyone there? Open the door. The factory was deathly silent. After that loud noise, there was no more movement. Just as the bodyguards were about to forcibly break the lock, the sound of gears turning came from inside the roller shutter door. Then a harsh metal grinding sound followed. The rusty roller shutter door slowly rose upwards. The first thing that seeped through the gap was not the morning sunlight, but a strong smell of engine oil that made people suffocate, and a mixture of metal, scorched and ozone, a strange smell. Then a tall and straight figure appeared against the factory building. The dim light inside appeared behind the door. I was wearing that dirty work vest, holding a rag covered in oil stains and wiping my hands. My eyes were lazy and tired, as if I had just stayed up all night, and came out of an internet cafe after playing games. I glanced at the large convoy outside the door, and then at Wang Siki holding up his phone camera. Are you trying to kill me? I casually draped the rag over my shoulder. My voice hoarse. Didn't you send the progress video? Haven't you seen nuclear fusion ignition? Wang Siki looked at the person in front of him. An unremarkable young man. His Adam's apple rolled with difficulty. He pointed to the dark depths of the factory behind me, his voice trembling. The video you sent me. Is it real? What exactly did you put in it? I grinned, and didn't answer Wang Siki's question. Instead I moved aside and snapped my fingers towards the inside. With a crisp snap the next second, deep inside the factory, a spine-chilling, blue beam of light shot up into the sky, instantly tearing through the dim space. Then came the heavy sound of hydraulic machinery, like the breathing of an ancient beast. In front of Wang Siki all the bodyguards and the 100,000 viewers in the live stream, who were terrified to the extreme. A giant mechanical foot entirely made of exposed rough metal pipes, and shimmering blue superconducting lights slowly emerged from the shadows, and then heavily stepped onto the concrete floor of the factory gate. Spiderweb-like cracks spread wildly in all directions from the footprint. Debris pinged off the bodyguard's sunglasses, making crisp sounds. This foot alone was as big as a large truck. The metal lower leg extending upwards directly reached the 10-meter-high factory ceiling. Dead silence. In front of the gate of Hongqing Heavy Industry Repair Shop, time seemed to stand still. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the colossus that had shattered the concrete floor. It was a mechanical foot made purely of steel, with exposed thick hydraulic pipes and blue glowing superconducting coils. It was deeply embedded in the cracked concrete pit, and wisps of white high-temperature steam were still emanating from the edges of its soul. As if an ancient fierce beast was growling lowly, two black-clad bodyguards nearly 1.9 meters tall, and claiming to have won underground boxing championships, were now trembling uncontrollably. Their hands, accustomed to holding guns, had lost the strength to even draw their batons. When humans face creations with overwhelming advantages in size and mass, the megalophobia etched in their DNA is instantly activated. Wang Siki stood at the front, less than 3 meters away from the giant mechanical foot. The Steadicam stabilizer he was holding had tilted to one side, the lens pointing diagonally towards the sky. His mouth was slightly open. His breathing stopped. Waves of heat washed over him. Distance from that mechanical giant foot, there was less than 3 meters left. The Steadicam he was holding. The stabilizer has already tilted to one side. The camera is tilted towards the sky. His mouth was slightly open. Respiratory arrest. Waves of heat came one after another, swept over by the mechanical leg. His cheeks burned from the heat. That was the residual heat overflowing from a micronuclear fusion reactor on standby. Young master. The assistant behind him choked back a sob, and carefully tugged at Wang Siki's windbreaker hem. Let's call the police. This thing looks like it'll eat people. Wang Siki suddenly snapped back to reality, shaking off the assistant's hand. As if a sleepwalker had suddenly woken up, he didn't retreat, but instead took stiff steps. 1 step, 2 steps, slowly walking towards the steel behemoth, emitting a faint blue glow. Don't touch me, a lazy voice came out, filled with deep fatigue and an undeniable warning. The reactor just completed its idle test. The outer armor temperature is around 120 degrees Celsius. Do you want to experience teppanyaki? Wang Siki's outstretched hand froze in midair, just a few centimeters away from a dark red, high-carbon steel armor plate. He felt the terrifying radiant heat that could instantly blister skin. This isn't cardboard. It's not fiberglass. It's certainly not a prop carved from foam on a Hollywood set. This is a genuine heavy military creation, weighing over 100 tons. You. Wang Siki turned his head to look at me, standing in the shadows, wiping the grease from under my fingernails with a dirty rag. What kind of monster are you? The big toy on the lawn is just for show. I yawned, my peripheral vision sweeping over Wang Siki. The order clearly stated codename Crimson Storm. Height 50 meters. Required omnidirectional movement. Core power source with realistic glowing and heating effects. Coating using military-grade matte anti-rust paint. I casually recited the order requirements, and then pointed to the mechanical leg in front of me. The right leg frame and neural conduction hydraulic system for the project are assembled. As for the anti-rust paint, the advance payment hasn't arrived. I don't have money for paint. Is there a problem? Wang Siki felt his brain freeze. Luo Ji's world completely collapsed in this dilapidated repair shop. He suddenly realized that the missing centimeter had omitted hadn't resulted in a con artist running off with the money, but had awakened a thoroughly insane industrialist lurking among the common people. No problem. Wang Siki suddenly started laughing neurotically, his laughter growing louder and louder, until it turned into hysterical shrieks in the empty workshop. I spent 50 million to buy an ancestor, ha ha ha. Just as Wang Siki entered a state of frenzy, the phone in his hand suddenly vibrated wildly, accompanied by a piercing alert sound. He looked down at the livestream. Due to the Steadicam's tilt earlier, the camera had only captured the giant mechanical foot and the rising white smoke, not the full view of the entire mechanical leg, but the deafening landing roar alone, and the violent ground tremors, had already sent the 100,000 viewers in the livestream into a complete frenzy. The dense barrage of comments completely obscured the screen. The server lagged for several seconds. What was that noise just now? Did the meteorite just fall? I can testify. I live in the southern suburbs of Jiangnan City. Where is the young master? It's definitely a script. It must be that the young master spent a lot of money for traffic. Hired a movie special effects team to cause trouble on site. Real-life explosions and post-production synthesis. Now influencers will do anything to get attention. They are willing to spend any amount of money. Seeing the screen full of script and fake and special effects words, Wang Siki's fanaticism gradually subsided, replaced by a kind of arrogance and anger. Arrogance and anger of being questioned by mortals. Special effects script. These idiots sitting behind the screen typing on their keyboards have no idea what kind of great miracle is being born in the real world at this very moment. Wang Siki took a deep breath. He suddenly raised the stabilizer in his hand and aimed the camera back at the 15-meter-tall mechanical right leg. Standing in the center of the factory building, Wang Siki spoke into the microphone. His voice was low, carrying a solemnity like a pilgrimage. You say this is a script. Okay, then I will show you clearly today. He walked slowly around the mechanical leg with his phone, showing every detail without reservation. To millions of netizens, the camera zoomed in. Look closely at these welds. Wang Siki pointed to the junction of two high-strength titanium alloy plates. The dense dragon scale-like, flawless welding pattern. Those who know speak up. What prop factory can produce this level of welding technology? The camera moved down. Look at this. He aimed the camera at the four main hydraulic cylinders at the base of the thigh. Pure steel casting. The piston rod diameter exceeds half a meter. If this thing is fake, Wang Siki will eat this hydraulic pipe raw today. Finally he stepped back and aimed the camera at the miniature cold fusion reactor. That was humming softly. The faint blue plasma halo was still dazzling. In the sunlight during the day, a circle of tiny iron filings, weightless due to the strong magnetic field, floated around. Have you ever seen light and shadow effects that perfectly simulate the movement trajectory of dust in the air? As the camera moved and displayed, the number of bullet comments showed a strange downward trend. The tens of thousands of people who were just shouting about fakes. 10 to 10 years of heavy machinery manufacturing. The tens of thousands of people who were just shouting about fakes were silenced in the face of pure industrial violent aesthetics. 10 to 10 years of heavy machinery manufacturing. The oil cylinder's load-bearing level absolutely exceeds the current market. It took a full half a minute. I am 10 to 10 years of heavy machinery manufacturing. Then scattered bullet comments began to drift by. Is that floating? This volume this, and with a chilling self-doubt. I have been doing heavy machinery manufacturing for 20 years. The load-bearing level of that hydraulic cylinder. The largest mining excavator on the market. Is it a war machine? I study materials science. The color and reflectivity of those armor plates are not right. Very not right. That's not civilian steel at all. It looks more like aerospace-grade special titanium alloy. Look at that blue glowing sphere. Why are the iron filings around it floating in mid-air? Magnetic levitation technology is impossible. Such a small volume. How can it generate such a large magnetic field energy consumption? Panic and shock spread rapidly like a virus on the internet. This live broadcast, initially seen as a joke by influencers debunking fakes, was about to turn into something else. The atmosphere was tense. The audience was silent. The live broadcast was about to turn into something else. The atmosphere was tense. The audience was silent, in a state of a runaway wild horse. Hit, it's gone. It's galloping in an uncontrollable direction. Galloping in an uncontrollable direction. The number of online viewers in the live broadcast room, in just 10 minutes, soared from 100,000 to 500,000, and it's still growing exponentially. I stood aside and watched Wang Siki's actions coldly. I don't care about live broadcasts. Nor do I care about fame. There is only one thing I care about. I knocked on the rusty iron door next to me, interrupting Wang Siki's passionate commentary. Turn off the live broadcast when the performance is over. My factory is private property. Unauthorized filming is prohibited. Wang Siki was stunned for a moment. Quickly and clumsily turned off the live broadcast room. He put his phone back in his pocket. Turned to look at me. No longer seeing me as a deadbeat. Brother Su. Wang Siki rushed to me in 3 steps. His face was flushed with excitement. He even wanted to grab my greasy hand. I was wrong, I judged a book by its cover. You are not a PNZ. You are the contemporary Liu Ban. You are the hope of human heavy industry. I calmly avoided Wang Siki's hand. My eyes were still as calm as water. Less nonsense. Since you have inspected the goods and confirmed that there is no discrepancy, I extended my right hand. Palm up. The first phase of the project is seriously over budget. Just now to demonstrate the neural bridge to you. Scrapped 3 sets of superconducting coils and 2 load-bearing columns. The second phase requires the procurement of higher spec materials. No pleasantries. No boasting about my own technology. Only 2 simple and crude words. Wang Siki did not feel the slightest offense. Instead he felt that this was the demeanor of a hidden master. Wang Siki turned his head sharply. Roared at his stunned assistant. What are you still Leng Jie for? Notify the finance department. Immediately use my private account. Transfer more to Brother Su's account. Not 200 million. The assistant trembled all over in fear. Stammered in reply. Young master, your private account has a limit. The maximum amount that can be transferred at one time is 10 million. 200 million requires the chairman's personal signature for approval. Wang Siki's face stiffened. Then he gritted his teeth. Then transfer in batches. Transfer all the cash you can use first. Those supercars under my name. The villa in the city center. Immediately list them for sale at a low price. In the name of the $100 billion group. Rent a piece of land in the western suburbs. Nominally to build the largest heavy metal theme park in Asia. He turned to look at me. His eyes flickered with wild ambition. Brother Su, I know you can't fully utilize your talents here. As long as you say the word. Materials, equipment, venue. As long as it's a problem that money can solve. It's all on me, Wang Siki. Even if I go bankrupt. I have to see this 50-meter National Guardian artifact stand up with my own eyes. I looked at the second-generation rich man in front of me who seemed to have had his Ren and Du meridians opened. The rich second generation who opened the Ren and Du meridians. A barely perceptible curve finally appeared on his lips. He wouldn't have to go to the scrap metal graveyard anymore to haggle with Fatty Zhao for used scrap metal. The planetary progress required by the system mission. With this super ATM, he could finally turn on the double speed mode. No need for a theme park. I turned and walked towards the dim depths of the workshop. Have the 200 million you just mentioned ready. What I need next can't be bought on the market. I'll make a list. Avoid the sight of customs and the military. I stopped. Half my face was hidden in the shadows, revealing only a pair of cold eyes. From now on, we're not making figurines. We're making a knife that can pierce the sky. If you're afraid of dying, you can still take the money and get out now. Wang Siki took a deep breath. His chest heaved violently. He adjusted his expensive wrinkled trench coat. His back was straight. Being able to be the sheath for this knife is the most awesome investment of my life. At the same time, Jiangnan City International Airport, a Gulfstream G650 private jet, painted entirely white, landed silently on the VIP tarmac. The stairs were lowered. Several foreign men in well-tailored custom suits, carrying black metal briefcases, quickly disembarked from the plane. The man in the lead had immaculately styled blonde hair. He had a high nose bridge, and his pair of ice blue eyes revealed a snake-like cold-bloodedness and shrewdness. He wore a tiny, invisible tactical earpiece. His leather shoes made crisp sounds on the asphalt of the tarmac. He was Richard, the ace executive of the Blackstone Group, codenamed Viper. Several black bulletproof cars were already waiting on the tarmac. Richard got into the back seat of the bulletproof car. The briefcase did not contain weapons, but a highly integrated, military-grade holographic communication terminal. The screen lit up, displaying the command center of the Alpha Electronic Reconnaissance Ship. Commander, this is Richard. I have arrived at the target city. Richard's voice was devoid of any inflection, like a precise machine. On the communication screen, the captain's face was terrifyingly grim. Richard, the plan has changed. Just 15 minutes ago, strong energy fluctuations erupted again at the target location. Classified. Top secret. Strong energy fluctuations erupted again at the target location. Classified. Top secret. Moreover, the captain brought up a segment of a blurry screen recording. Classified. Top secret. Intercepted from the network. Classified. Top secret. It was from Wang Siki's livestream. Classified. Top secret. The moment the 15-meter tall mechanical. Classified. Top secret giant leg landed with a roar. Classified. Top cred although the image quality was severely compressed. Classified. Top secret the industrial oppression that surpassed the era. Classified. Top sec was still transmitted through the screen. Richard looked at the recording. His ice blue pupils contracting slightly. What is this? A new movie trailer from Hollywood? Richard frowned. If this is a movie trailer, I wouldn't have transferred you from the battlefield overnight. The captain gritted his teeth. Our technical department has analyzed this segment of footage frame by frame using physical calculations. The results show that the mass structure and stress of that metallic construct, as well as the faint plasma glow emanating from within it, CASTCLTOTC and the faint plasma glow emanating from within it, and the faint plasma glow emanating from within it, are all real physical feedback. Richard's expression finally changed. He slammed his laptop shut abruptly, leaning slightly forward. You mean to say that the people of Dragon Country in a scrapyard have developed the single-soldier heavy armor technology that our consortium has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in without success? It's not single-soldier armor. Based on its volume, this is just one leg. If it's fully assembled, its height will reach an astonishing 50 meters. The captain's voice carried a hint of undisguised fear. Richard, this is definitely not the work of some civilian workshop. This is Dragon Country's military's most core, highest-level top-secret project. They deliberately disguised it as a broken repair shop, even using influencer livestreams to confuse the public, making us think it was a farce. The captain slammed his fist on the console, his eyes fierce. They are showing us a display of force. Once this 50-meter monster is fully assembled, our military power in the Far East will be reduced to scrap paper. Richard, your lone wolf squad has been out of contact for 12 hours. I suspect they have already been eliminated by Dragon Country's security forces. Richard took a deep breath. I understand, sir. I will personally take over. At all costs. The captain issued the final order. Find that mechanic. PCASTECTDTIC. Uncover the military technical team behind him. POHSTCLYDTIO. Obtain the blueprints. POHSTCLTDTIC. If you can't take them, detonate the target area. We absolutely cannot let that monster walk out of the repair shop. Richard leaned back in his leather seat and closed his eyes. He pressed his earpiece, issuing orders in a cold voice. Notify action teams 2 and 3. Target, Red Star Heavy Industry Repair Shop, southern suburbs of Jiangnan City. Activate Ghost Protocol. Cut off all network signals and external power to the area. Richard opened his eyes, looking at the bustling streetscape of Jiangnan City outside the car window. A cruel cold smile curved his lips. No matter which ace unit is hiding behind you, tonight that repair shop along with that pile of scrap metal will become a giant tomb. The convoy accelerated quietly amidst the traffic, like a group of black sharks smelling blood, heading towards the abandoned factory in the southern suburbs. The bloody curtain is about to be drawn. In this forgotten steel wasteland, the night sky like thick ink completely swallowed the abandoned industrial zone in the southern suburbs of Jiangnan City. Wang Saki's convoy had left half an hour ago. The Red Star Heavy Industry Repair Shop once again fell into a deathly silence. Holding a can of cold black coffee, he tilted his head and took a large gulp. The bitter liquid slid down his throat, forcibly dispelled the fatigue deep in my brain. The system brought up the full armor structural diagram for the second phase. Azure data streams flowed across my retina like a waterfall. The chest, left leg and both arms of the 50-meter mecha, as well as the spinal nerve skeleton, transformed into a precise 3D projection, suspended in mid-air. The workload was immense, even with the unlimited financial support promised by Wang Siki. Creating this steel demon out of thin air within 30 days was still a miracle that defied common industrial sense. I walked towards the workbench, preparing to pick up the plasma cutter and continue processing that piece of tungsten steel armor plate. Just as my fingertips were about to touch the cutter, a faint sharp sound. The fluorescent lights in the entire factory instantly went out. Not just the lights, the row of dim streetlights on the southern suburban highway in the distance, and the searchlights on the smokestacks of several chemical plants working overtime further away. All plunged into complete darkness. In the same second, absolute silence with no hum of machinery stopping, no explosion of a transformer short-circuiting. This was a deliberate, absolutely precise localized physical cutoff. My hand stopped in midair. I glanced at the status bar. The signal bars showed 0. Power outage, network down, signal jammed. I threw my phone back onto the table, and in the darkness grabbed a dirty rag to wipe my hands. A cold laugh escaped my lips. It seemed young Master Wang's live broadcast just now had attracted a few flies that preferred the shadows. I didn't panic. In the workshop where I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, I relied on muscle memory to accurately navigate around the scrap metal on the floor and head straight for the sphere encased in a rough cast iron shell. In the depths of the workshop, the micro-cold fusion reactor. Since you've cut off my external power cable, I'll just have to use my own generator. I gripped the main circuit breaker with both hands and forcefully pushed it upwards, accompanied by a low-frequency rumble that resonated with my heart. An azure plasma light instantly tore through the darkness. The superconducting coils inside the reactor emitted a dazzling glow, illuminating the entire workshop as if it were daytime. I dragged an industrial power cable as thick as my forearm, skillfully peeled back the insulating rubber, and forcibly connected it in parallel to the reactor's output port. Power sufficient to support a small city instantly surged into the repair shop's aging internal electrical grid. The light bulbs sparked one after another, barely withstanding the violent current. After doing all this, I looked towards the dilapidated roller shutter door outside the factory. My intuition told me the flies outside were definitely armed, and not the kind of street thugs who carried baseball bats like Baldy. My blueprints were directly transmitted from the system to my brain. There wasn't even a scrap of paper in the room. If you want to steal technology, you're destined to go back empty-handed. I stroked my chin. But if these guys get careless and damage the reactor casing I just welded, that would be a big problem. I walked over to the scrap pile and searched for a moment. The casing of the reactor I just welded is broken. That's a big problem. I walked over to the scrap heap, searched for a moment, pulled out several bundles of exposed power lines, dismantled from a Fei Chi high voltage tower. I tied one end of these power lines firmly around the factory gates, metal frame and the surrounding sheet metal walls. The other end directly connected to an old-fashioned transformer that I had already modified beyond recognition. Micro-fusion residual power connection. Voltage set to 100,000 volts. I patted the transformer's casing, walked back to the workbench, put on my welding mask. The faint blue arc lit up again. I couldn't even be bothered to listen to the commotion outside the door. In a patch of weeds 300 meters away from the repair shop, two figures in pure black tactical forward-moving suits, like ghosts blending into the night, were silently approaching the factory. They were the vanguard scouts of Richard's Ghost Special Operations Team. Thermal imagers and night vision devices worked alternately. COM, active SIGNALBLOCKING, 100% report from Unit 1. The signal jamming net has been deployed. The target has become blind and deaf. Richard's icy command came through the earpiece. Do not alert the target. Infiltrate and plant micro-surveillance probes. Confirm the status of the internal energy source. If there are physical blueprints, take them directly. If resistance is encountered, kill on sight. The two scouts exchanged tactical hand signals, lowered their bodies, and darted towards the factory like leopards. Behind a sheet metal window. This was the weakest point of the entire building structure. Scout Unit 1 drew his waist-mounted plasma-cutting dagger, preparing to cut through the sheet metal. Scout Unit 2 held his modified submachine gun with a silencer, and vigilantly scanned the surrounding darkness. Scout Unit 2 placed his left hand wearing a tactical glove gently on the sheet metal wall, preparing to leverage it. Within 1/10,000th of a second after my fingertip touched that layer of rusty sheet metal, a deafening explosion like summer thunder erupted in the night. There was no fire, only an extremely dazzling, pure blue high-voltage arc that instantly coursed through the entire body of Scout Unit 2 along the sheet metal, a terrifying current of up to 100,000 volts, supported by a micro-fusion reactor as an endless energy source, instantly destroyed the so-called high-tech tactical stealth suit. The insulating layer was pierced as if it were made of paper. Scout Unit 2 didn't even have time to scream. His muscles instantly carbonized in violent spasms. He was thrown violently by a massive electromagnetic repulsion force, like a ragdoll, smashing into the muddy ground 20 meters away, emitting a nauseating smell of burnt flesh. Scouts Unit 1 and 2 were horrified. Sensor overload. He abruptly raised his gun and pointed it at the seemingly ordinary sheet metal wall. His night vision screen was currently bursting with blinding white light. The thermal imager emitted a sharp overload alarm. The screen displayed that the surface of the dilapidated factory was currently flowing with a high-frequency electromagnetic net undetectable to the naked eye, but terrifyingly hot. Damn it, what kind of defense system is this? Command. We have been intercepted by a high-energy electromagnetic weapon. We were intercepted by high-energy electromagnetic weapons. The second scout retreated while running wildly. RIDTUACYRNFOON. The scout retreated while running wildly. He yelled frantically into the communicator. 3 kilometers away, a mobile command center disguised as a van. Inside, Richard stared intently at the screen. The violently fluctuating energy readings. His ice blue pupils contracted to the size of pinpricks. Outside a scrap metal recycling plant, Richard punched the console. A dent appeared in the hard alloy surface. The defensive net the opponent had casually set up, the peak power output at that moment, even exceeded their consortium's latest developed armored vehicles electromagnetic reactive armor. Retreat Unit 2. Retreat immediately. Richard gritted his teeth and gave the order. He realized that a forced assault would only lead to more casualties. This dilapidated factory did not house a mere welder, but a demon-wielding dimensional strike-level technology. Cut off all main roads leading to the southern suburbs. Fabricate a biochemical leak incident. Set up a military blockade. Without my command, not even a bird is allowed to fly in. Request deployment of Punishers from headquarters. Heavy armed helicopter squadron. If we can't steal it, then we'll crush it to dust with absolute firepower. The blockade was silently established, but under Wang Saki's terrifying financial power and the operation of the family's 10 billion logistics network, this blockade turned into a kind of tacit underground game. The next 28 days became an unrepeatable crazy legend in the history of world heavy industry. On the underground railway of Jiangnan City, every few late nights, a numbered freight train rumbled into the abandoned freight station in the southern suburbs. Tons of aviation-grade titanium alloy plates, medical-grade superconducting cables, main drive shafts of decommissioned warships, disguised as scrap steel, were continuously delivered to the Red Star Heavy Industry Factory. The workshop roared day and night. I deprived myself of almost all my sleep. My eyes were bloodshot. My work vest had long been hardened by sweat and machine oil into a rigid armor. Left arm hydraulic transmission matrix docked. Chest dual-core power feedback system. Wiring completed. The massive steel skeleton grew taller day by day, 30 meters 40 meters. The massive steel skeleton, when the huge chest armor plate was slowly lowered by the heavy gantry crane and firmly locked onto the main load-bearing shaft of the abdomen. I pressed the rivet gun in my hand. Amidst the deafening sound of metal collision, to accommodate this ever-growing behemoth, I had to dismantle the factory, all the ceiling partitions inside, and used a huge military-grade waterproof canvas to completely seal off the sky above the repair shop. From the outside, this factory looked like it had grown a bizarre black tumor, piercing the sky. On the night of the 29th, a torrential rainstorm swept across Jiangnan City. Arrived as scheduled. The wind howled. Thunder roared. On the tin roof and the huge waterproof cloth, the sound of dense war drums echoed. Inside the room, a dim incandescent lamp flickered in the wind. In my left hand I held a steaming bowl of braised beef noodles. In my right hand I held a plastic fork. I was diligently bringing noodles to my mouth. My hands were trembling slightly. Not out of fear, but because of a month of extreme manual labor. My muscles were severely overdrawn. Above my head, under that huge tarp, lay a 50-meter-tall crimson mecha. It stood silently in the darkness, like an ancient war god emerging from the depths of hell. The dual-core micro-cold fusion reactor in the deep chest cavity emitted a low resonance, as if this behemoth was breathing evenly. The system's cold prompt sounded in my mind. SS-class mission. 50-meter class mecha physical assembly. Progress 99%. Remaining parts. Neural bridge operation cabin activation module. Detected external environment. High-risk hostile armed forces. I stopped eating and looked up towards the factory's dilapidated rolling shutter door. The heavy rain masked many sounds, but could not mask the 6 faint footsteps that approached like ghosts sticking to the wall, and the faint sound from the distant sky, the roar of heavy propellers cutting through the rain curtain. Richard's patience had finally run out. The moment the heavy helicopter formation was in place, he dispatched the Demon Realm's most elite lone wolf squad to carry out the final physical elimination. Suddenly the lock was instantly melted by a plasma cutter. Without making any noise, the workshop was dim and damp. The air was filled with the strong smell of machine oil. 3 dazzling red lasers. The beams pierced the dim space, precisely converging on my heart. The lone wolf squad leader held his gun. The infrared scanner locked onto the young man eating noodles. The lone wolf spat out 4 words coldly on the comm channel. His index finger slowly rested on the trigger. I slowly put down the instant noodle box, pulled the dirty towel draped over my shoulder, and wiped the soup from the corner of my mouth. I didn't look at the red dot on my chest. Instead I looked up, at the sleeping giant above my head. A month of madness. A month of suppression. All the blueprints. All the welds. All the sweat. Were waiting for an outlet for release. I originally wanted to interact with you as an ordinary car mechanic. But instead I was met with an assassination in the middle of the night. Without knocking. My voice was hoarse. With a chilling calmness. The lone wolf frowned under his mask. Open fire. I stood up, casually threw away the towel, and walked to the old-fashioned electric switch next to it connected to the main reactor. There's an old saying in China, to receive without giving is impolite. My palm pressed on the switch handle. A bloodthirsty laugh curved my lips. Since the young masters have traveled so far to die, then I'll show you what the ultimate antidote is for. Fear of insufficient firepower. The switch was pulled down resolutely. With a bang. With a roar. Not the sparks of an anti-theft net, but the true awakening of a god. The giant dustproof and waterproof cloth covering the surface of the mecha, accompanied by the crazy roar of the hydraulic engine, tore apart inch by inch. Blinding azure light, like a supernova tearing through the universe, instantly illuminated the dome of the entire factory. The sound of giant mechanical gears tearing through the thunder of the rainy night. A 50-meter tall crimson armor, intertwined with rain and light, reflected a despair-inducing metallic sheen. The members of the Lone Wolf Squad froze in place. Their night vision goggles instantly shattered under the intense light. They looked up at that steel demon that almost broke through the sky, felt a tremor from the depths of their souls. I pressed the red startup button on the control panel. Hydraulic system unlocked. Gravity overload 30%. Crush them. The 50-meter tall steel foot slowly lifted. Then with a terrifying weight of over 100 tons, like a collapsing mountain, crashed down. The first live combat test, using the flesh and blood of these few top foreign agents as sacrifices, officially begins. A deafening thud drowned out the rolling thunder in the night sky. Red Star Heavy Industry Repair. The cracked cement floor, completely turned to dust at this moment. The mechanical foot weighing over 100 tons, carrying the violent thrust of the hydraulic engine, smashed down on the ground mercilessly. No struggle. Those wearing bulletproof tactical forward suits, ace agents who claim to be able to fight their way through any battlefield, in the face of absolute mass crushing, were as fragile as flies caught under a hammer. A powerful shockwave mixed with gravel and rainwater spread outwards in a ring, tossing up the mountains of scrap metal parts piled up in the workshop. A few seconds later, the hydraulic valve at the bottom of the mechanical foot emitted a long sigh of exhaust. Scalding white steam rose, intertwining with the cold rain seeping in from the broken roof. I sat on a tire chair not far away, my expression unchanged. Finishing the last, I didn't even look at the tragic scene. Under the mechanical footprint, I knew very well that under the stomp of a 50-meter class mecha with 30% gravity overload, carbon-based life forms wouldn't even leave a single complete bone. The system reported the damage status of the mecha's foot armor. I put down the instant noodle box and casually asked, the tungsten steel-coated armor at the bottom of the foot is 100% intact. No effective physical resistance detected. I twitched the corner of my mouth. As expected, the load-bearing armor forged from aircraft carrier arresting gear was purely overkill for stepping on people. I walked towards the temporary control console, pieced together from discarded electronic components. Due to the mecha's forced startup, the giant waterproof camouflage covering the factory roof had been torn open with a huge gap. Cold rain poured down through the gap and hit the crimson mecha's outer shell, instantly evaporating from the heat emitted by the reactor, forming a dense white mist. The 50-meter tall steel demon, 50-meter tall steel demon god, standing quietly in the rainy night and white fog. The deep blue fusion core in his chest cavity flickered rhythmically, like a beating heart. Just then, a low and dense sound of rotor blades cutting through the air pierced the rain curtain, approaching rapidly from the night sky in the distance. I looked up, through the hole in the roof of the factory building, looked at the dark night sky. 3 dazzling tactical searchlights, like 3 sharp swords, tore through the heavy rain clouds, shining directly on the Red Star Heavy Industry shaky tin roof. At the same time, 5 kilometers away from the repair shop, inside the mobile command center, Richard suddenly crushed the all-black custom steel pen in his hand. The life signs of the 6 members of the Lone Wolf team on the big screen all turned into dazzling red crosses representing death in the same second. Wiped out instantly. Richard's voice became sharp with disbelief. No exchange of fire. No distress signal. Even if there was a reinforced company of regular troops inside, Lone Wolf could hold out until the helicopter formation arrived. Commander, the target's energy peak just showed an abnormal rise. The radar analyst's hands were frantically tapping on the keyboard. Cold sweat covered his forehead. It was a pure kinetic energy burst, like a mountain suddenly falling. Richard's icy blue pupils stared intently at the screen, his chest heaving. His proud tactical acumen in this. Is the Punisher formation in place? Richard growled into the microphone through gritted teeth. Report, Commander. 3 Punisher heavy attack helicopters are hovering in the airspace directly above the target. Weapon systems unlocked. Hellfire anti-armor missiles have locked onto the target building. Richard stared intently at the huge tumor-like building wrapped in tarpaulin on the screen. A hint of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. High in the sky, 3 all-black Punisher heavy attack helicopters hovered in a V formation in the wind and rain. These are aerial killers secretly modified by the consortium. Their armament is enough to destroy an armored battalion. Received the order. Prepare to clear. The lead pilot, wearing a night vision helmet, pressed the red launch button on the joystick. Without hesitation, 6 Hellfire anti-armor missiles, trailing dazzling orange-red flames, tore through the rain curtain and smashed into the dilapidated repair shop below at supersonic speed. From the pilot's perspective, this was just a boring target practice. No matter what kind of defenses were hidden below, they would be instantly turned into scrap metal under the concentrated fire of 6 Hellfires. However, when the missiles were less than 50 meters from the tin roof, something unexpected happened. The huge tarpaulin that had already been torn open above the factory building, suddenly, as if from within, sudden change, that had already been covered over the factory. A huge waterproof cloth with a torn opening. Suddenly it was as if something from within, the terrifying power that erupted, completely expanded. The sound of fibers tearing, making one's teeth ache, echoed through the night sky. Both were made entirely of aerospace titanium alloy. Giant mechanical arms shimmering with a cold metallic luster suddenly emerged from under the waterproof cloth. Arms crossed, like an insurmountable steel shield, directly in front of those 6 whistling missiles. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions detonated in midair, blinding fireballs instantly engulfing the entire roof of the factory. The violent shockwave cleared the surrounding rain for hundreds of meters. Target hit. Assessing battle results. The lead pilot reported coldly over the communication channel. Inside the command vehicle, Richard's expression slightly eased. The high-temperature metal jet of the Hellfire missile could easily penetrate the depleted uranium armor of a main battle tank, let alone 2 mechanical arms. But, the moment the smoke and fire in midair were blown away by the wind, the helicopter pilot's pupils instantly contracted to their limit. No armor shattered, no parts flew off. In that inferno and thick smoke, a crimson steel giant, 50 meters tall, slowly stood up. On the mechanical arms crossed in front of its chest, apart from a few scorched explosion marks, not a single armor plate was dented. The arm shields, forged from a blend of discarded tungsten steel and high-strength titanium alloy, perfectly absorbed all the explosive impact. What kind of monster is this? The lead pilot's voice trembled uncontrollably. The palms holding the control stick were instantly soaked in cold sweat. In the light of the helicopter's searchlight, rough weld seams like bulging muscle veins covered the matte crimson armor surface. In the chest area, 2 miniature cold fusion reactors emitted a chilling faint blue light. And the most despair-inducing part was the mech's head. No extra decorations, only a thick sloped armor plate, and hidden behind the armor seams, those 2 glowing, scarlet optical sensors like the Grim Reaper's eyes. It stood there, its height directly level with the hovering helicopter formation. That sense of oppressive presence, a giant beyond human comprehension, caused the 3 battle-hardened pilots to instantly lose all will to fight. Ascend, ascend immediately. Target not destroyed. The lead pilot roared hoarsely, slamming the control stick to the bottom. The 3 heavy helicopters, as if possessed, increased their rotor speed, attempting to escape this death zone. But it was too late. From the ruins below, I stood before a rudimentary control console, my 10 fingers covered in neuron capture electrodes. I raised my head, my gaze coldly fixed on the holographic screen, on the 3 fleeing light spots. You want to leave after attacking? Did you ask for my permission? My right arm suddenly pulled back. Then, with a muscle-tearing, furious stance, swung forward fiercely. Neural bridge synchronization rate 95%. Right arm hydraulics fully engaged. The still steel demon god in the night sky suddenly moved. Instead, it carried a sharpness and swiftness that defied common sense physics. 6 thick exhaust pipes on the right shoulder simultaneously sprayed high-pressure steam, providing auxiliary kinetic energy for this massive mechanical arm. The 50-meter-long mecha swung its 20-meter-long steel right arm, like swatting at an annoying fly. with a terrifying sonic boom that tore through the air, smashing fiercely towards the nearest wingman. Dodge, quickly dodge. The lead pilot roared desperately through the communicator. The wingman pilot watched as the hill-like crimson mechanical hand rapidly enlarged in his field of vision, filling the entire cockpit's windshield. No suspense. The multi-million-dollar Punisher heavy attack helicopter was like a crushed soda can hit by a hammer. The main rotor was directly snapped. Sparks and scattered parts bloomed in the night sky, like a grim fireworks display of death. The giant mechanical hand directly penetrated the helicopter's cabin, crushing it to pieces. The remaining 2 helicopters frantically unleashed their onboard GAU-8 Gatling cannons. Armor-piercing rounds with a caliber of 30 millimeters rained down on the mecha's chest and facial armor. Dense sparks flashed wildly on the crimson armor. These bullets, capable of tearing through light-armored vehicles, when hitting my composite armor forged from stacked scrap carrier steel plates and superconducting coils, only managed to leave shallow white marks. They couldn't even completely scratch off the anti-rust paint. I snorted coldly. I controlled the mecha. The scarlet optical sensors locked firmly onto the lead helicopter that was firing wildly. The mecha's left hand clenched into a fist in the rain. The reactor in its chest emitted a roar that pierced the clouds, instantly boosting its output power. The ground cracked. The entire southern suburbs ground trembled violently with this single stomp. Using the thrust from this stomp, the mecha's left fist, carrying a blue plasma arc from bottom to top, delivered a simple yet powerful heavy uppercut, precisely smashing into the underside of the lead helicopter. Flames soared into the sky. The helicopter was directly smashed into 2 pieces by this punch. The burning wreckage, trailing long black smoke, crashed into the distant wilderness like a falling meteor. Seeing this, the last helicopter completely lost its mind. The pilot even abandoned the attack, unconditionally turning the aircraft's head and attempting to escape into the thick thunderclouds. Trying to run, my eyes turned cold. I controlled the mecha to open its right mechanical hand stained with helicopter wreckage and engine oil. A layer on the palm modified from a high-frequency transformer. The electromagnetic pulse emitter instantly charged. Microfusion residual power connected. Directional EMP interference. A high-frequency electromagnetic pulse wave invisible to the naked eye swept across the night sky at the speed of light, precisely hitting the escaping helicopter. The helicopter's tail rotor instantly stopped spinning. All electronic instruments went black. The powerless helicopter spun in the air, plunging headfirst into the abandoned chemical plant below. Triggered a fierce chain of explosions. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds from start to finish. 3 heavy-armed helicopters representing the enemy's top-tier technology were hovering over this junkyard considered a scrap heap by a hand-built mecha pieced together from Feiju steel scraps, in the most primitive and violent physical way. Completely annihilated, the night sky returned to peace. Only the burning wreckage of helicopters crackled in the rain. The 50-meter-tall crimson storm stood in the center of the ruins, letting the heavy rain wash over its steel body, covered in battle scars. Its pair of scarlet eyes pierced through the rain curtain and coldly gazed in a certain direction 5 kilometers away. Inside the mobile command center, Richard slumped back in his leather seat, as if all the blood had been drained from his body. He stared blankly at the main screen. At the last frozen image, a steel god standing in thunder and rain was looking back at him from a distance of 5 kilometers. Its pair of scarlet mechanical eyes seemed to see through all physical disguises, piercing directly into his soul. A trembling voice came from the communicator. Should we continue the blockade mission? His usual arrogant demeanor, looking down on everything, was now completely crushed into powder. Richard let out a mournful roar. Retreat immediately. Notify the Pacific Fleet. This is not a civilian workshop. This is a strategic weapon of Dragon Country. This is a goddamn steel demon that can change the world order. And in the ruins of Hongqing heavy industry, I tore off the sensor patch on my finger and let out a long sigh of stale air. I picked up the cracked mobile phone next to me and dialed Wang Saki's number. The call was answered almost instantly. Wang Saki's rapid breaths came from the other end. Brother Su, I just heard a violent explosion in the southern suburbs. Are you okay? I'll mobilize my private guards to come over immediately. A few mosquitoes have been swatted. Swatted. Wang Siki swallowed a mouthful of saliva on the phone. I looked up at the dilapidated factory building above and the surrounding facilities that had been completely reduced to ruins, and said with a hint of dissatisfaction, but my factory was blown up by them. Tell your finance department to complete the project ahead of schedule. Also add a sum for war damage compensation and site reconstruction fees. The final payment is due The storm stopped precisely at 4 a.m. The thick storm clouds were torn apart. A crescent moon hung in the sky over Jiangnan City. In the desolate night sky of the southern suburbs, the tin roof of Hongqing Heavy Industry Repair Shop, which once sheltered from wind and rain, now only remained a circle of scorched and twisted metal debris. I stood in the center of the ruins covered in mud and broken glass, and let out a long breath of white stale air. The helicopter wreckage falling from high altitude was still burning. In the chemical plant several kilometers away, the towering flames illuminated half of the night sky as if it were daytime. The air was filled with the strong smell of aviation kerosene and ozone. System cut off the mecha's main control energy. Reactor enter minimum power state. I issued the command in my mind. The 50-meter-tall crimson demon god standing in the center of the ruins let out a low metallic sigh. The dazzling azure plasma glow deep within its chest slowly receded, eventually transforming into a dim faint light, maintaining its mecha form. The heavy hydraulic pumps gradually depressurized, emitting a continuous hissing sound. The giant mechanical arms drooped again, like two unshakable steel city walls, blocking the front of the mecha's torso. I ripped off the neural capture electrodes attached to my temples and wrists. A wave of intense dizziness instantly swept through my brain. My legs went weak, and I knelt in the mud on one knee, my hands bracing myself firmly on the ground, gasping for breath, directly using my body's muscle electrical signals to drive a 50-meter class steel behemoth. Was no different from using a household fuse to handle the current of a high-voltage tower. Although the superconducting coils provided by the system shielded most of the load, the neural backlash from that heavy punch still put my capillaries at risk of rupture. The first phase of the project is over. If I were to do this primitive bare metal control again, my brainstem would be completely fried. I wiped away a trickle of blood seeping from my nostrils. Light climbed up the mecha's massive body, finally settling on the large groove at the junction of the mecha's chest and cervical spine. That was the core of the second phase of the project, the reserved position for the neural bridging operation cabin. To truly bring this deity to life, I needed to build a fully enclosed cockpit suspended in conductive amniotic fluid, using a neural roaming level brain-computer interface to achieve perfect fusion between human consciousness and mechanical body. And this requires an astronomical amount of rare metal polymer composite resin and military-grade coolant. I stood up, dragging my weary steps towards the somewhat intact brick office in the corner. I pulled out my cracked phone. A transfer message from Wang Siki was clearly visible. Account ending in 8888. Received a cross-bank transfer of 20 billion RMB. I looked at the string of zeros, not feeling any excitement. I just picked up an oil-based pen from the side and crossed out a batch of expensive material lists on the blueprints on the wall. The money is here. Now it's time for frantic procurement and assembly. However, I didn't know that. 200,000. The moment I shut down the reactor's peak output. In the SSS-level Strategic Command Center 300 meters underground in the southern theater of Dragon Country, the alarms had just subsided. In front of the massive holographic tactical sandbox, Commander Lei Ting, dressed in a dark green uniform, stood with his hands behind his back. Like a towering mountain, his gaze was sharp as a knife, staring intently at the few segments of blurry infrared thermal imaging footage on the screen. An intelligence officer strode up behind Lei Ting and gave a standard military salute. Radar department confirms 3 heavy aircraft without identification codes have invaded our southern suburban airspace. But before our air defense missiles could lock on 300.33 but before our air defense missiles could lock on 900 to 33, all 3 aircraft have crashed, belonging to a certain overseas military-industrial consortium. But before our air defense missiles locked on 300.33 but before our air defense missiles locked on 900 to 33, these 3 aircraft have all crashed, belonging to an overseas military-industrial consortium. Punisher series attack helicopter. Thunder didn't look back. His voice was low, like muffled thunder. Cause of crash. The intelligence officer swallowed, pulled up another set of data. The southern suburbs substation recorded a surge sufficient to destroy the entire city's power grid. A strong directional electromagnetic pulse erupted in the area. Before the satellite was blinded by the pulse, it captured a humanoid heat source outline about 50 meters tall. Silence in the command center. All senior staff stared at that giant humanoid heat source. Felt like decades of established modern military common sense was collapsing. Thunder was silent for a long time. He extended his calloused index finger and lightly tapped the location of Hongqing Heavy Industry in the southern suburbs on the holographic sand table. Notify the Shadow Special Reconnaissance Brigade. Thunder issued the military order. Under the pretext of a chemical plant explosion and toxic gas leak. Immediately take over all major roads within a radius of 10 kilometers in the southern suburbs. Set up a cordon. No one is allowed in or out. The chief of staff stepped forward and asked the commander in a low voice, "Do we need to send heavy armored units to storm that repair shop? And control the target? Control it with what? Are we going to use our main battle tanks as stepping stones? For that 50-meter monster?" Thunder suddenly turned around. His eyes revealed a wisdom that saw through everything. The foreign consortium's ace flight squad didn't even last 30 seconds before being physically annihilated. This level of technology, this terrifying destructive power, did not appear out of thin air. A rare smile appeared on his lips. No matter which deity was hidden inside, as long as he killed the foreign, those shady scum, then he is the sharp sword of Longguo. Transmit my orders. Seal the perimeter. Silence within. No one is allowed to enter the repair shop without my highest command. And on the other side of the city, a war without smoke began in a luxurious 5-star hotel. The presidential suite was the stage. Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the dawn break on the horizon. His blonde hair was messy. His eye sockets were sunken. He no longer had the composure and elegance he had a few hours ago. On the room's leather sofa sat several men in suits, with bulging bellies and Chinese faces. They were the bosses of the largest local real estate developers and building material suppliers in Jiangnan City. Mr. Richard, one of the fat men, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said cautiously, "The amount of funds you requested in the property acquisition is too large. The land and debts of the entire southern industrial zone are bundled. It will cost at least 5 billion. The Blackstone Consortium's offshore accounts have already transferred 10 billion to your accounts." Richard turned around. His ice blue pupils were filled with madness and ferocity. Richard turned around. The ice blue pupils were filled with madness and ferocity. "I don't need to hear the process. I only want the result. From now on, that abandoned industrial area in the southern suburbs, along with all the scrap yards inside, the building materials warehouse and logistics transfer station, will all be transferred to your Dingsheng Real Estate's name." He walked to the table. His fingers tapped heavily on the coordinate photo of the Hongxing Heavy Industry Repair Shop. Physical destruction won't work. He is a beast with absolute power. But even beasts need to eat. Richard sneered, his tone chilling. Any industrial creation requires a continuous supply of materials. Cut off his material supply chain. Cut off his industrial water and high-voltage electricity. I want to turn that repair shop into an isolated island. A steel graveyard cut off from water and electricity. The local bosses exchanged glances. Although they didn't understand why this foreign big shot was so determined to go after a dilapidated repair shop. But under the onslaught of 10 billion cash, capital's fangs were fully unleashed. "Understood, Mr. Richard. Today we will take the courts enforcement order and land deed to take possession of the land. That area in the southern suburbs. Not even a rusty screw will be allowed to be transported in." The sun finally rose above the horizon. Jiangnan City after the rain welcomed the morning sunlight. I lay on a bed made of a few old car seats pieced together. I had barely closed my eyes for 2 hours when I was woken up by a piercing phone ring. The caller ID showed Wang Siki. I pressed the answer button. Before I could speak, the voice on the other end came through. Young Master Wang's furious roar. "Brother Su is in trouble, damn it. Someone is messing with us." I sat up, rubbing my sore brow, my tone still calm. "The materials for the second phase of the project have been seized. I mobilized 30 heavy trucks from outside the province overnight, loaded with polymer gel, medical-grade titanium alloy plates and 10 tons of high-purity liquid nitrogen. But as soon as the convoy exited the highway, they were stopped by a group of people in black suits from a private security company and..." Wang Siki paused, his voice laced with disbelief. "And they had a full set of legal documents. Just last night, within a few hours, the entire land of the southern industrial zone was fully acquired by a company called Dingsheng Real Estate. They cited illegal construction in the district and the existence of major safety hazards as reasons to set up roadblocks at the intersections and not allow any large vehicles to enter. I tried to use my connections in the city, but all those leaders wouldn't answer their phones. The power of capital was fully displayed at this moment. No need for guns or cannons. No need for missiles. Just a document and a few roadblocks can starve the pinnacle of human industrial creations to death within the blockade." And Wang Siki added through gritted teeth, "Zhao Peng's scrap metal recycling station was also forcibly bought out by them. Zhao Peng's packed up and left overnight. Now all the scrap steel in the southern suburbs No one dares to sell it to you. After listening, I felt neither anger nor panic. I just looked up at the clear blue sky above, and that crimson demon god standing quietly in the sunlight. I know, I replied indifferently. God Su, don't rush. I'll go home and find my old man right away. A $10 billion group fighting for cash flow. I Wang Siki am not afraid of anyone. I'll bring people to smash the roadblocks right now. Wang Siki shouted, preparing for war. No need to smash. The materials are stuck at the highway entrance. Let them watch carefully. I'll handle the rest. Hanging up the phone, I stretched lazily. I walked to the old broken faucet next to me, which I had salvaged from the junkyard, wanting to wash my face. I turned the valve. A hollow, dry sound came from the pipes. Not a single drop of water flowed out. I looked up at the distribution box on the wall. The indicator light for the industrial main power grid had also turned a dead gray. Water and electricity cut off. The noose of capital had been precisely placed around the neck of Hongqing Heavy Industry. Just then, a harsh car horn sounded from outside the repair shop's gate, accompanied by the roar of heavy diesel engines. I casually picked up the dirty towel and wiped my hands, then walked towards the factory building's door, which had long been smashed open. In the open space outside the gate, more than a dozen black sedans had stopped, filling the area. Behind the sedans, 2 full rows of heavy excavators and bulldozers, their tracks crushing the gravel, were parked. Over 100 thugs dressed in uniform black, carrying rubber batons and riot shields, had completely surrounded the repair shop's entrance. The crowd parted, and a man in a suit with slicked back hair and gold-rimmed glasses, carrying a briefcase, arrogantly walked out. He was accompanied by several media reporters, carrying cameras. Lawyer Li Ming, known as the cold-blooded hound of the Jiangnan city real estate industry, specialized in handling all sorts of difficult, forced demolitions and land disputes. Li Ming pushed up his glasses and looked at me, dressed in ragged work clothes, a hint of undisguised contempt flashing in his eyes. Are you Su Jie, the legal representative of Hongqing Heavy Industry? Li Ming opened his briefcase, took out a stack of documents stamped with a bright red seal, and threw them directly into the muddy water at my feet. This land in the southern suburb industrial zone officially belongs to Dingsheng Real Estate as of last night. Your land lease contract with Hongqing Heavy Industry expired 3 years ago, and you have been illegally occupying it since then. Li Ming's voice was loud, deliberately ensuring that all the media cameras behind him recorded it. Given the severe explosion and unexplained building collapse that occurred in this area last night, seriously threatening public safety, I am now officially representing the property owner to issue you a forced eviction notice. We have already cut off the water and electricity. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and get off this land. Li Ming pointed at the heavy excavators behind him, which were emitting deafening roars, and sneered. Li Ming pointed to those behind him who were making deafening roar of heavy excavators. A cold laugh. 10 minutes later, these machines will flatten this pile of scrap metal. All the thugs gripped their rubber batons tightly, waiting for the angry counterattack of this down-and-out man, or to kneel and beg for mercy. However, I didn't even glance at the documents on the ground. I stepped over the muddy water and walked up to Li Ming. The distance between the two was less than half a meter. I looked at him coldly. There was no emotional fluctuation in my eyes. My voice was hoarse, with a rough, gritty tone that came from struggling in the wasteland. I raised my right hand and pointed behind me at that dilapidated factory building without a roof. There is a cold fusion reactor in my workshop. Its idle output power is 3 times that of the Jiangnan City South Suburb Power Station. You cut off my electricity. Li Ming was stunned for a moment. Then he seemed to hear something incredibly funny, and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Boss Su, did you melt your brain welding? Cold fusion, you say? Do you think this is a sci-fi movie? Before I finished speaking, I continued to interrupt him. You cut off my material supply chain. I took a step forward. My mecha skeleton is already formed. Armor coverage has reached 70%. A cold smile curved my lips. Do you really think a few broken excavators can push down a 50-meter tall steel god? Li Ming felt a chill down his spine under my gaze, but he thought of the 10 billion in funding support behind him and forcibly calmed his mind. Stop the bullshit. Playing God. Li Ming was enraged and ashamed. He took a few steps back, waved his hand, and roared at the excavator drivers behind him. The 10 minutes are up, push it for me. Flatten that broken door and everything inside. That's illegally built. Rumble. 5 heavy excavators roared simultaneously. Their massive steel tracks crushed the stones on the ground. They raised their steel buckets weighing several tons, with the force of thunder, and smashed them fiercely towards the dilapidated gate of the repair shop. The media reporters frantically pressed their shutters. The thugs let out excited shouts. This is a one-sided slaughter. I just stood there and slowly closed my eyes. Deep within my retinas, the system's cold and ruthless countdown quietly reached 0 at this moment. High-risk physical impact detected. System judges defense mode activated. Phase 2 project forced activation plan. Neural network direct connection. Warning. Forced direct connection will cause irreversible damage to the host's nervous system. Continue? I suddenly opened my eyes. Deep within my pupils, faintly a blue data stream flashed like lightning. I coldly uttered 2 words in my mind. Did not pull the power switch. Did not press the button. Just as the 5 giant steel buckets were about to smash through the factory gate, a subsonic roar that made the soul tremble exploded from the depths of the ruins of Hongqing heavy industry. The ground seemed to lose gravity at this moment. All the rubble and mud within a radius of tens of meters, even the rubber batons in the hands of those thugs, experienced a moment of weightlessness. What was that sound? Li Ming clutched his ears in pain. His facial expression contorted to the extreme. Before he could react, from the dead silence within the factory building, 2 beams of light like blinding searchlights suddenly lit up. Then, to everyone's utmost horror, a giant mechanical hand forged entirely from pure black tungsten steel, covered in rough welds, shimmering with blue plasma arcs, like the claws of a demon tearing through the gates of hell, suddenly emerged from the factory ruins. The area of that palm was larger than the cockpits of 5 excavators combined. Without any fancy moves, just a pure physical sweep, the mechanical hand of a 50-meter class mecha swept through the army with overwhelming force, smashing down on the 5 roaring, heavy excavators. Sparks flew, and the grating sound of twisting metal echoed through the sky. Under the absolute crushing force of mass and kinetic energy, the 20-ton excavators were as fragile as children's toys. The hard steel digging buckets were instantly flattened. Several excavators, along with their drivers, were sent flying like bowling pins, crashing heavily onto the Mercedes convoy 10 meters away, causing a series of violent explosions. Amidst the rolling smoke, I still stood in place. Not even a corner of my clothes dusted. I looked at the thugs who were so scared they peed themselves, scurrying away in all directions, some even crawling. I then looked down at the lawyer Li Ming, who was slumped in the mud, his crotch completely soaked. Go back and tell your master. I patted Li Ming's pale face. My voice in this hellish scene was exceptionally clear. Whether it's a capital acquisition or cutting off water and electricity, if you want this land, tell him to come and get it himself with an aircraft carrier. Mud splashed. Steel burned. In front of the Red Star Heavy Industry repair shop, the air was filled with the strong smell of diesel leakage and the pungent odor of burning rubber. The 5 20-ton tracked excavators had now become a pile of twisted, crushed scrap metal. The giant pure black tungsten steel mechanical hand, after completing that world-destroying sweep, did not pursue further, but with a dull hydraulic exhaust sound, slowly retracted back into the factory's bottomless shadow. The entire scene was dead silent. Only the crackling sound of flames burning metal. Lawyer Li Ming sat slumped in the mud pit, his expensive custom suit stained with mud and scattered engine oil. His gold-rimmed glasses had one lens shattered by the previous shockwave. His other intact eye stared fixedly at the dark broken opening of the factory. His pupils dilated, his jaw trembling uncontrollably. The thugs in black who were shouting a moment ago were now scrambling backward in a panic. Some crawled on all fours, not even bothering to pick up the riot shields they dropped. Some, to run faster, simply threw off their leather shoes. When humans face colossal beings that transcend their cognition, the brain's amygdala will forcibly take over the body, issuing a single command. Several media reporters carrying cameras were so terrified they lost their souls. A broadcast-grade camera worth over 100,000 fell into a puddle, its lens shattered. A female reporter covered her mouth, barely suppressing the churning in her stomach, finally collapsing next to a Mercedes-Benz, whose hood was dented. Retreat, retreat. Someone started shouting with a hoarse roar. The remaining convoy, like startled beasts, madly swerved their steering wheels. Tires skidded wildly on the muddy ground, emitting a pungent white smoke, then fled in disarray. I stood in place, watching coldly as these defeated lackeys of capital fled. Raising my right hand, I wiped away a trickle of dark red blood, seeping from my nostrils with the back of my hand, forcibly using a neural network direct connection to drive the local limbs of a 50-meter mecha. The massive data stream instantly backfired, making my brain feel as if it were being pierced by countless rusty steel needles simultaneously. The second phase of the project must be completed as soon as possible. Without a fully enclosed buffer cockpit, this mecha is a meat grinder that could burn out the pilot's brain nerves at any moment. 3. While Li Ming's convoy was fleeing in panic, 300 kilometers away at the southern toll station of the highway. 3. Another war without smoke was entering its white-hot stage. 30 heavy-duty semi-trailer trucks loaded with medical-grade polymer gel, special titanium alloy plates and 10 tons of high-purity liquid nitrogen were blocked at the toll station exit like a steel dragon. Ahead there was a temporary roadblock constructed by 8 riot-control armored vehicles and 3 layers of barbed wire. More than 50 fully armed mercenaries, wearing unmarked black combat uniforms, held riot guns, and coldly watched the intercepted convoy. They were private armed security outsourced by Richard through Dingsheng Real Estate. Wang Siki stood on the roof of a Maybach, holding a megaphone, looking down at the mercenaries. His trench coat fluttered in the wind. His usually meticulously styled hair was now somewhat messy, but his eyes held an unprecedented madness. "I'll warn you one last time." Wang Siki's voice echoed through the megaphone. On the empty highway, this is the private property of a $10 billion group. Your actions constitute armed robbery. Remove the roadblock immediately. Roadblock? Roadblock. The mercenary captain stepped forward holding a court injunction with an official seal. Young Master Wang, don't try to pressure us with the $10 billion group. The Southern Industrial Zone is now the private territory of Dingsheng Real Estate. Demolition work is underway inside. We have a legitimate road closure permit. Your convoy is suspected of transporting hazardous chemicals. We have the right to refuse passage. If you want to pass, wait until the 30 working day approval process is completed. 30 working days? Don't talk about 30 days. If the nuclear fusion reactor on Su Shen's side loses its coolant, it could melt down at any moment. Let's talk after the 30-day approval process is complete. 30 working days. Don't even say 30 days. The nuclear fusion on Su Shen's side. As long as the reactor loses coolant, there is always a risk of meltdown. Richard's plan was earth-shattering. He just wanted to drag that mecha to death within the rules. Wang Siki took a deep breath. He threw away the megaphone in his hand. He turned his head and looked at the main highway behind him. Due to the forced closure of the toll station, a traffic jam had already formed for miles. Several kilometers of civilian vehicles. Among them were over a dozen heavy-duty dump trucks loaded with slag and ore. Parked on the road, the drivers impatiently honked their horns and talked about the law with him. Wang Siki jumped down from the roof of the Maybach. He walked directly to the group of blocked civilian truck drivers. Wang Siki walked to a 100-ton king mud truck loaded with ore. With a self-weight exceeding 80 tons, he knocked on the driver's cabin door. The truck driver with a face full of flesh rolled down the window and stared blankly at the crazy rich second generation in front of him. "How much is this truck including the cargo worth?" Wang Siki's tone was calm. 440,000 at most. The driver stammered in reply. Wang Siki nodded. He turned and pointed to the mountain of money on the ground. And then pointed to the 8 riot control armored vehicles forming a roadblock ahead. "I'll give you 2 million to buy your accelerator pedal." Wang Siki's voice was not loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Those in front are private security, not the police. The riot guns in their hands cannot penetrate your windshield. Stomp on the accelerator. Crash through that pile of scrap metal for me. If the car is damaged, it's on me. If you go in, my top-tier 100 billion group legal team will ensure your acquittal. And I'll give you another 5 million for a new home. Take 2 million of the money on the ground as a deposit. Do you agree? The truck driver looked at the arrogant mercenaries ahead, and then stared intently at the 2 million cash on the ground. He had been driving large trucks for many years, living a life on the edge. He had never seen so much money in his life. Greed instantly overcame fear. "Understood, boss. You back up a bit. Don't get any blood on you." The driver suddenly pushed open the car door, jumped out of the car and rushed towards the pile of money like a madman, stuffing banknotes into his snakeskin bag. Great rewards bring forth brave men. This scene completely ignited the madness of the truck drivers behind. "Boss, my truck is also a 100-ton king. I'll do it too. I've always disliked those guys in black leather." In just 3 minutes, 5 heavy trucks loaded with tens of tons of stone, in the roaring diesel engine's growl, formed a goose feather formation for a charge. The mercenary captain in front saw this scene. His face instantly turned pale. "Madman, this is a damn madman." He raised his gun and fired a warning shot. The captain roared hoarsely. Bang bang bang. Dozens of riot guns fired into the sky simultaneously, emitting dull gunshots. But in the face of the heavy trucks' deafening engine roar, this warning seemed pale and powerless. Crash through them. Wang Siki stood by the door of the Maibach and suddenly waved his arm. 5 steel behemoths, each weighing nearly 100 tons, spewing thick black smoke, ignored the mercenaries' warning, at a speed of 80 kilometers per hour towards the armored vehicle. Launched a suicidal charge at the roadblock. This is a collision of pure kinetic energy and mass. The armored vehicle's bulletproof steel plate under the impact of the 100-ton king was as thin as a soda can. The first truck slammed hard into the center of the roadblock. The 2 armored vehicles were directly overturned by the immense impact force, sliding tens of meters on the asphalt road. Sparks flew. Barbed wire was roughly torn apart. The mercenaries were terrified, dropped their weapons and scrambled to the sides, piled out of the guardrails to escape. Those so-called legal documents, in the face of absolute violent demolition, turned into flying scraps of paper. After a round of charging, the indestructible toll station roadblock was completely torn open with a huge gap. The convoy ignited. Full speed ahead. Target, southern suburb Red Star Heavy Industry. Wang Siki got into the Maibach, adjusted the collar of her trench coat. 30 heavy trucks loaded with precious materials entered through the gap one by one, like an armored cavalry breaking through, rushed towards my repair shop. At the same time, inside the Red Star Heavy Industry repair shop, I was standing in front of a spherical cabin with a diameter of 2 meters. Forged from pure titanium alloy. This is the brain of the entire 50-meter mecha. The shape of the neural bridge operation cabin. The interior of the cabin is densely packed with superconducting neural wires as complex as human blood vessels. These wires eventually converge in the center of the cabin on a driver's seat made of pressure-resistant memory foam. No high-end dust-free laboratory. No precise robotic arm assistance. Relying solely on master-level titanium alloy welding skills and the diagrams instilled in my mind by the system, using a simple plasma cutting pen, carved inch by inch in the scrap workshop. This epic-making technological creation. The system's electronic voice sounded in my mind. Cabin hardware closed loop complete. Airtightness test excellent. Warning, currently lacking high molecular buffer. Gel and liquid nitrogen cooling circulation system. If neural direct connection is forced, the probability of host brain death is 99%. I ignored the system's warning. Picked up a rag, carefully wiped a trace of oil stain on the edge of the cabin door. I turned my head to look outside the factory building. That muddy dirt road. The roar of engines grew louder from afar. A Maibach led the way. 30 heavy semi-trailer trucks braked sharply on the wasteland outside the repair shop. Tires dug deep ruts in the mud. Wang Siki pushed open the car door. Her leather shoes stepped into the mud and water. Ran all the way into the ruins of the repair shop. When he stepped into the workshop with the torn roof, he stopped abruptly, looked up. Although on live broadcast, in surveillance video, he had seen this creation countless times. But in reality, at a distance of less than 10 meters, looking up at the 50-meter tall steel demon, the shock still made him feel a strong sense of suffocation. The surface of the giant metal armor still bore traces of rainwater. A faint dark red glow pulsed within its chest cavity with each breath. Its massive left hand, which had just flattened 5 excavators, now hung quietly at its side. A piece of yellow sheet metal from an excavator's door was even stuck between its fingers. Su Shen swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I've brought the materials for you." I jumped down from the workbench. I watched the huge liquid nitrogen tanks being unloaded from the heavy trucks, and the buckets of polymer gel emitting a pungent chemical odor. The corners of my mouth, previously tense, finally curved into a fanatical smile. "Well done." I patted Wang Siki on the shoulder. "Now have your drivers help pour all of this gel into that spherical cabin. Connect the liquid nitrogen tanks to the external circulation pump." "What are you doing?" Wang Siki looked at the sealed metal sphere. His intuition told him Su Shen was about to do something crazy. I calmly uttered 2 words. The next hour was spent in tense activity. Large amounts of translucent polymer gel were injected into the cockpit. Inside these gels, countless microscopic conductive particles were suspended. Invisible to the naked eye, they would replace air and envelop the pilot's entire body, not only perfectly conducting the body's weak muscle electrical signals, but also offsetting over 90% of the terrifying G-forces. When the mecha performed supersonic maneuvers, or endured violent physical impacts, the gel filled the liquid nitrogen cooling circulation system and went online. The cabin temperature dropped to -2 degrees Celsius. Wang Siki looked at the monitoring tablet in his hand and reported to me. I picked up a few medical-grade electrode patches with thin silver needles. And without hesitation I inserted the silver needles into several key acupoints behind my spine. A trickle of bright red blood flowed down my back. I didn't even frown. You're going in yourself. Wang Siki saw through my intentions and was greatly alarmed. This thing hasn't even been tested with a dummy. And you're connecting directly to a human. What if your neurons overload? There's no time for testing. I turned and walked towards the cabin door. Richard's capital blockade is just the first step. Now that he's found my coordinates, I wouldn't be surprised if his next move is to carpet bomb the area with intercontinental missiles. A 50-meter mecha, as long as he's still on the ground and can't move, is a giant living target. I climbed the metal ladder and stood before the half-open cabin door. The biting cold mixed with the smell of chemical gel assaulted me. I turned to look at Wang Siki, whose face was full of worry. Smash the rolling door completely and clear a path to the main road. My voice was cold and firm. What are you going to do? Wang Siki asked instinctively. I looked up at the sky, which was gradually darkening. Having built 50-meter-long legs, if I don't go out for a stroll or two, how can I be worthy of your 200 million final payment, young master? As the words fell, I looked at the sky that was gradually darkening above my head. Built 50-meter-long legs. Go out for a walk or two. How can I live up to your 200 million final payment, young master? The voice fell. I took a deep breath. I leapt forward and plunged directly into the operation pod filled with ice-cold gel. The metal hatch closed with a bang behind me. The hydraulic locking mechanism made a dull biting sound. The entire repair shop fell into a brief dead silence. The ice-cold gel inside the operation pod instantly enveloped my mouth and nose. I forced myself to open my eyes, suppressing the instinct to suffocate. The oxygen supply device inside the gel automatically activated. Tiny bubbles containing high-concentration oxygen flowed into my lungs through my nasal cavity. The electrode needles on my spine and the seats superconducting interface perfectly meshed. The system's neural bridging program initiated. I issued the final command in my mind. With a boom, it was as if a bolt of lightning struck my brain directly. A mechanical data stream so vast it couldn't be measured by numbers. Like a tsunami, overwhelmed my perceptual boundaries. Vision disappeared, replaced by a 360-degree no blind spot. Optical radar scanning network. Hearing disappeared, replaced by the capture of vibrations from all electromagnetic waves within a 50-kilometer radius. I felt my torso expanding infinitely. My skin became thick tungsten steel armor. My heart became two cold fusion reactors erupting with millions of degrees of heat. Outside the repair shop, Wang Siki looked up at the sleeping giant. The 50-meter-tall crimson mecha suddenly let out a metallic roar that pierced the sky. The faint blue glow deep within its chest instantly transformed into a scarlet red filled with destructive aura. Its two closed mechanical eyes suddenly opened. Two red lasers like swords pierced the twilight. Countless cables connecting the mecha to the surrounding equipment snapped one by one as the mecha stood up, bursting with dense blue electrical sparks. The ground trembled violently. The 50-meter-tall steel god was precisely Kasuo breaking free from gravity's pull. Under the shocked gazes of countless people, it took its first step forward. Mud and water exploded outwards in a ring. A deep half-meter-wide footprint was deeply imprinted into the topsoil of the southern outskirts wasteland, accompanied by a deafening sound of metal friction. The 50-meter-tall crimson storm officially took its first step into the real world. The broken brick wall blocking its path, like a cookie crushed by a heavy bulldozer, instantly turned into a sky full of dust. Its heavy steps caused localized micro-earthquakes. The 30 heavy semi-trailer trucks parked on the periphery of the repair shop bobbed up and down in the violent tremors. The metal anti-slip plates in the truck beds made a teeth-grinding collision sound. Wang Siki stood in the muddy water, his expensive trench coat already splattered with mud. He tilted his head up, letting the high-temperature steam expelled by the mecha, mixed with raindrops, sprinkle on his face. His Adam's apple rolled with difficulty, his eyes fixed on the steel demon god that seemed to have walked out of ancient mythology. The truck drivers who had just taken cash and were ready to risk their lives were all frozen in place at this moment, some still tightly clutched snakeskin bags filled with banknotes. But their gaze had completely detached from money, completely stripped of their ability to think by a sense of oppression from a colossal being, originating from the depths of their genes. My God, this is still something man-made. A sense of oppression from a colossal being originating from the depths of their genes, completely deprived of the ability to think. Heaven, is this still something man-made? A driver's legs went weak, slid to the ground along the truck's tires, muttered to himself. Within their limited understanding, the limits of human ground combat weapons were main battle tanks weighing tens of tons. But the 50-meter-tall figure before them, its entire body shimmering with a faint blue superconducting halo, Each step it took could cause earth-shattering tremors. This humanoid armor had surpassed the common sense of carbon-based life forms. Compared to the shock and fear outside, deep within the mech's chest cavity, inside the neural bridge operation cabin, I was undergoing an unprecedented sensory reshaping. Cold polymer gel completely submerged my body. This special liquid isolated all external physical noise, yet through suspended conductive nanoparticles, it precisely transmitted the mech's mechanical feedback into my cerebral cortex. I didn't open my eyes, I didn't need to. The 360-degree optical radar scan network provided terrain heat sources, wind speed within a 5-kilometer radius, even the trajectory of dust suspended in the air, all converted into a faint blue data stream, projected directly onto my retinal nerves. I felt my limbs stretch infinitely, my bones replaced by an indestructible tungsten steel main shaft. My blood turned into special transmission fluid, rushing through hydraulic pipelines. The 2 miniature cold fusion reactors in my chest were outputting in sync with my heartbeat frequency, enough ferocious energy to destroy a city. System self-check. Main servo motor group operating normally. Load-bearing frame stress 45%. Neural synchronization rate 98%. I issued commands in my mind. Thoughts like lightning. The mech's head, devoid of any excessive decoration, slowly turned. Its crimson optical detection eyes scanned the desolate main road of the southern suburbs. Through the radar view, I could clearly see in the distance the wreckage of anti-riot armored vehicles, crushed by trucks at the highway toll station, and black figures fleeing in panic in the night. Richard's Capitol blockade, in the face of absolute physical power, was as fragile as a window pane easily pierced. Since Capitol's methods failed, it's time to bring out the real weapons, isn't it? A cold smile curved my lips. I controlled the mech to spread its massive mechanical right hand, feeling the air resistance transmitted from my fingertips. At the same time, in a presidential suite on the top floor of a 5-star hotel in the center of Jiangnan City, Richard smashed his fist onto an expensive, tempered glass coffee table, the glass surface instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. He stared intently at the walls. Huge holographic tactical screen. The image displayed was the 50-meter-tall crimson mech, emerging from the repair shop ruins, a real-time satellite image. The blockade line was broken by a group of dump truck drivers. You bunch of battle-hardened mercenaries. Can't even stop a group of civilians paid with money. Richard roared hysterically into the communicator.